Good morning.
Welcome.
We're going to go ahead and start. My name is Kathy Turner. I'm a Big Country Master Gardener. Welcome to Waterwise Gardening. We're going to kick off the morning with Beth Hamaty. She's going to talk to you about Waterwise Gardening. So, restrooms are over here. Feel free to get up and go as you need. Food, snacks are outside. Most of us have on shirts, but if you need something, just tag one of us and we'll see if we can help. Beth, do you want the lights?
Yeah. Can y'all hear me okay?
Oh, did you want to announce about the presentations on the website real quick or no?
Oh, yes.
And I try to put a paper on every desk. So
Okay. This year we've done something a little different for those of you who have not attended any of the sessions. We put the presentations on the website for you to print out. Give you some note place, but you can scan. There's some little papers on the tables, and you can scan and pull up the presentations. And when you get home, you can print them out. So.
And then the website's listed too.
Yes, the website's listed.
So is there a scan for the herb one? We missed it.
The herb presentations are out there. When you go to that, you can go, there's a Saturday seminar tab, and it has all the presentations on there.
Okay, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm not used to microphones, so I'm probably going to knock this thing around, something along those lines. So good morning, I'm Beth Hamaty. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about Waterwise Gardening. A little background on me, I've been in the Master Gardeners somewhere between 5 and 10 years. I don't keep up with it very good. I used to teach at Abilene High. So that's one of the reasons I get to come and teach up here sometimes. Okay, so we're going to talk about some Waterwise Gardening, some drought tolerant landscaping. See if I can figure out how to work this thing. There we go. So why do we want to consider Waterwise Gardening to begin with? Well, we're semi-arid. A lot of people don't realize that. We are a short grass prairie. Why are we short grass? Because we don't get enough water to grow long grass. Okay? That's pretty much the way it works. Okay? Also, we tend to get our rain into big chunks in the spring and in the fall. May and June, and August, September. And then sometimes like this year, we don't even get it then.
We still have part of June.
That's true. That's true. Or July, yeah, a little bit of June. We might get some. I think next week we have a slight chance. So. Okay, landscape irrigation accounts for about 1/3 of all residential water use, totaling nearly 9 billion gallons. That's a lot. Okay. So Waterwise Gardening is going to save money. It's going to save you effort. I'm all big on saving effort. I'm a lazy gardener, and it's going to help the environment. It's much better if we. Water is a very precious commodity, and it's something we need to take good care of. Okay, so what are the principles of Waterwise landscaping? So choose the right plants. Plan it all out. Okay, I'm not as good at the planning all out. We tell you all the time, you should draw out a plan. Don't buy a plant unless you know where you're going to put it. Do as we say, not as we do. Because none of the master gardeners, well, some of the master gardeners do that, but a lot of us, we love plants. We buy them, we figure out where we're going to put them. So, but it is a good idea to plan it out, because if you kind of zone things, you have the things that you just are dying to have that take a little more water and you put them together, then that's going to be more practical than spreading them out all across and then having to water everything a whole lot. Plus, you might kill some of your more deserty stuff if you put it right next to something that's going to take a lot of water. So think about planning it out. Prep your soil, okay? If you're in this area, you have one of 2 types of soil, the 2 extremes, of course. You have clay or you have sand. And the way to fix them is the same for both, and that is organic material. Okay? Use your mulch, put in some compost. If you put it in the sand, it's going to help it hold soil. If you put it in the clay, it's going to help break up that soil and let the nutrients get to your plants. Establish practical turf areas. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in my presentation towards the end of our day, the second one I'm doing, about practical turf. we have a tendency to think that we need a huge lawn, because that's what we've kind of been trained to do. But is that what you really need, or is that just what you're used to? So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Okay, water efficiently. John's going to work on that. I'll talk about it a little bit, but he's going to talk about irrigation and irrigating efficiently. Use mulch and maintain it. Okay? I've been helping with the Wasp Museum in Sweetwater and helping them with some little landscaping. And they said, we want maintenance-free landscaping. Said, okay. Rocks.
Concrete.
Concrete, yeah. Dirt. That's pretty much it. Everything's going to take some maintenance. Yes, some things take more. Some things take less, but you're going to have to maintain. Okay, so the right plants. Waterwise gardening does not have to look like this. Now, if you like that, go for it. Okay, I'm not sure all of those are cold hardy enough for our area, but desert stuff works pretty well here. If you can get something that's cold hardy enough, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But most of us, that's not exactly what they want. I don't mind having a few succulents, but I have grandchildren, and my 2.5-year-old grandson, yeah, 2 minutes in and he would already be stabbed and bleeding. That's just the way he runs, okay? So, the right plants are keys. Choose native and adapted plants. Native plants are those that grow in our region. They need less water, less fertilizer, and they benefit native insects and birds. And this is a big thing. I am big on natives because it's so much better for the environment. It's going to help our pollinators. It's going to help our birds. But these are plants that have developed here. They're used to our environment. They're adapted to this environment. They know how to deal with drought. They know how to deal with flood. They know how to deal with cold. And they know how to deal with heat. Okay? If I look back to, the blizzard of 21, when we had all that ice and snow, and I look at what died in my yard, it was things that were not native. And I didn't really lose that many things. I was kind of surprised. Now, I thought I lost some things, but when spring came along, a lot of them came up from roots. Adapted plants are those that grow in regions with similar climates. So, it may be a plant that grows in Southern California and works here. It may be something that grows in Central Asia and does well here. Now, you do have to watch and make sure you're not using things that can become invasive and get out into the wild and outcompete natives. But there are some things that we can do. And one of the things about living in our part of Texas is most imports are not going to be able to handle the lack of water for too long. So they don't become as invasive as they do in some other places in our state. Okay, so some examples of natives. All right? So trees like oaks, pecans, redbuds, those are all good. Pecans have really, really deep tap roots. That's why they don't fall over in storms very often. Shrubs like Texas sage, dwarf yaupon, coralberry. I'm just throwing out some examples. Perennials, salvia greggii, Turk's cap, purple coneflowers, coreopsis, Greg's mistflower, Engelmann daisy is another good one. There's a lot of different plants out there that you can find that are native to shortgrass prairies, and they do well here. So some adapted plants. Trees like vitex, also called chase tree. Now in the hill country it's invasive. But here the seedlings will pop up, but if they're not getting watered regularly, they won't make it to adulthood. Because we're just too dry here. So we don't have to worry about it being very invasive. Crepe myrtles are great. Afghan pine. It's about the only pine tree that will grow in our area. The main thing with Afghan pine is don't water it. Once you get established, quit watering it. We're more likely to kill it with too much water than not enough. Shrubs, Nandina. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with Nandina. Okay? It's a good drought-tolerant shrub. Gives you good color in the fall. But it spreads, especially if you get the native. And you are not the native, but the original one, not the hybrids. And once you have it forever. Okay? I have one my mother gave me when I first started gardening. It will outlive me. I have had no luck digging it up, and I have 3 sons. They all 3 worked on it, and we could not get rid of it. So, just be careful. Winter honeysuckle is another great one. I have it in my backyard. It stays green pretty much through the winter. It'll drop some leaves. And really, really early spring, it'll put out some little kind of cream colored flowers. Fig is good. Lots of people enjoy fig, and rosemary is another one that works pretty well. Rosemary is a little bit short-lived, but they're not expensive. You can find them, in the herbs section at Lowe's for pretty low amount of money. Yes, ma'am.
My rosemary made it through the winter, never did decrease in anything, and now I got rosemary bushes that are lovely.
Like that.
Yeah.
My rosemary was the only thing that died when it was already on its last leg, because they only will live about 5 years. And I had noticed some branches were starting to die at the bottom, and I was like, yeah. And sure enough, the freeze just kind of finished it off. Some perennials. Lavender. I love lavender. I kill about 3 out of 5 that I plant. I have not figured out how, to do it. Usually, if I plant them somewhere and then forget about them, they do the best. Meadow sage is another good one. All those salvias do really pretty well. Bearded iris, dianthus, and Russian sage. Took my grandson to New Mexico for his summer trip with the grandparents, and Russian sage was blooming all over the place, from Carlsbad through Roswell, Alamogordo, and I'm thinking if they can handle that dry, they can handle our dry. So, avoid invasive species that can outcompete native plants. So, some things that I would recommend avoiding: Nandina, unless you really love it. English ivy, that's not a good one. The vinca vine that has little purple flowers, because once you get it, it's going to spread. The vinca that's the short ones that are just the annuals that come, they're fine. But it's the one that's the vining plant that has little blue flowers and grows along the ground. It's trouble. Those are the ones that I would definitely avoid in our area. So sources for finding out more about native adapted plants. Texas A&M has a plant selector that I use all the time just to get ideas about some things that are out there. Sometimes things that I don't think about. Plants that I see on a regular basis but don't always pop up in my brain. Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, they've got a great resource database. Native Plant Society of Texas also has one that's very good. And of course your local master gardeners. We tend to, when we have our plant sale in the spring and the fall, we tend to focus on natives and well-adapted plants, plants that will do well here. Books that I like: Howard Garrett's Plants for Texas. Howard Garrett's one of those guys who's kind of the Texas guru. There's a couple of them out there, but he's really good. Landscaping with Native Plants for Texas by George Oxford Miller, and Native Plants and Landscaping Region by Region, Sally Wazowski. There it is, Wazowski. Sorry, my Polish is not very good. Matter of fact, it's pretty non-existent. Okay, so planning and design, all right? So evaluate what you have, what you want, and what you need, okay? So I have 2 pictures up there that are about planting, okay? The first one is this wildflower bed here. I live on a corner lot, and the driveway is about halfway down the side of our lot, and past that, it is almost impossible to water. If I want to water that area, I have to connect 2 hoses, the one from the front yard and the one from the backyard, run it through the fence from the backyard, and then I can water. That is way too much work for me. Way too much work for me. We had grass there for a while, then the city had to come in and dig it up to get to some water pipes, and then of course they just left divots all over the place. And then I asked them to please come in and bring some dirt in and fill in those divots. And so apparently they went out in some pasture somewhere and brought in some dirt that was full of grass spurs and all sorts of stuff. So I kept looking at that area going, what am I going to do? And it finally dawned on me, put a wildflower bed in there. I don't have to water. Now right now, even my wildflower bed is looking pretty pitiful, okay? It looks really good in the spring, and it'll look pretty good in the fall. In the heat of summer, even the wildflowers in Texas kind of take a vacation, and they don't always look that great. I do have a Vitex out there, and that helps to kind of fill in a little bit. I have some red yucca. They always look pretty good. But I never know what I'm going to get. I got the seeds from Native American Seed, which is coming out of Junction, and they just gave me a wildflower mix, and I planted it, and every spring it's a little bit different than it was in the spring before, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. This is my youngest grandson, Hayes. Okay, we call him Baby Godzilla because he tears up everything he comes in contact with. He is showing you my dry creek bed. So again, when I first started gardening, I didn't really think about the consequences of my gardening. I just knew what I wanted. We had a little back porch. It's not real big, little patio, concrete. It's not very big. So we decided we would expand it with some pavers. But it sits a lot lower than the ground around it because I'd put in a flower bed. And I thought, ooh, wouldn't it be cool if I raise those flower beds up even a little bit more, put a small retaining wall, and then I have a kind of sunken patio. It would be lovely. And it is. And it floods. Every time we have a good rain, okay? It runs off the house, and my back porch, about this far from the door, we're going to have water. So I put in a dry creek bed. And it works. I did not have to dig that far down. Basically, I just dug a little trench. It was a little deeper on one end than it was the other. Put some rocks in there, as you can see. Grandkid loves the rocks to crawl on and play on, and it really worked. But that was a case where I should have planned better. If I had planned the way I had planned this, I wouldn't have had to do the work of dry creek bed. Okay. So think about water, drainage, and irrigation. Where's that water going to go? And are you going to have enough of it? Group plants with similar water needs. Will existing plants need to be moved or removed? When I first started gardening, I was a poor working mom with 3 boys, and my husband and I just didn't have a lot of money to spend on gardening. So I got a lot of fruit plants from my parents, and I would buy plants on sale, and I just couldn't bring myself to remove a plant that wasn't doing well. I just wishful thinking, surely I can nurse it back to health and it'll be fine. Now I'm a little more experienced and realize sometimes cut your losses. Sometimes it's okay, either move it or remove it. Put it where it's going to do well, otherwise you spend too much time and effort on something that's eventually probably going to die. Think about the size of mature plants. If you come to my house, you will notice that there's some things that are way too close to the house. And those are the first things I planted because I wasn't thinking about the mature size of the plants. Now I'm a little bit better about it. I still have a hard time visualizing, but I can look at that plant tag and see how big it's going to get. Write it down to help you form an overall picture. You don't have to graph it out on graph paper, but I do sometimes. Especially if I'm starting from scratch on a new flower bed. I've got to think about how much space I've got and what I want in there and what I want it to look like when I'm done, and it helps if I plan it out. But if all you do is just make a list of plants you think are going to work there, that's a start. Don't forget to check with where the utility lines are located. Okay? Luckily, I've never had an issue with that because my husband always reminds me, and he's aware of where they are. But you do need to do that because you never know where some of those underground things are. I was doing some, yes sir?
Legally required to call 811 if you dig anything in your yard.
In your yard. Okay, I didn't know it was legal, but okay.
Yeah.
I was working in my son's house at Grapevine, and I did not know this, but internet cable wires don't have a specific depth that they have to be buried at. They can actually literally lay it on the ground, put sod over the top of it, and it's legal. I found out that the hard way because I was putting in a little shrub for my daughter-in-law, and I went right through their internet line with a shovel. Yeah. Okay, so soil prep. Get a soil test to see if you have specific nutrient needs. Okay. I think this is really important if you're starting a new flower bed or if you've got a new house that you're working on. If you've been working in your yard a bit, you kind of feel comfortable, you kind of know what's there, it's one thing. But it's always a good idea just to get a soil test, see what's going on there, okay? And all you have to do is you get one of these little bags here from the ag office, and I think it's $10. They send it off by A&M and they'll analyze it for you and get it back to you in a couple of weeks. So is your soil sandy, loam, or clay? All right. How well does it drain? Now there's some different ways you can check that, but one of the best ways to do it is just dig a hole in the ground, put some water in the hole, and see how fast it drains out.
And if you can't dig a hole, it's clay.
It's probably clay, exactly. Yeah. That's for sure. So there we go, some clay, and of course sand. So if you have sand or clay, it's the same organic material that's compost. And remember, some native plants actually prefer leaner soils. So bluebonnets, for example, they really prefer something that's got some rock in it. They don't like the clay quite as much. And that's why they tend to do better in a bar ditch than they do in our yard sometimes. Okay, practical turf areas. How much grass do you want? How much grass do you really need? What's the best height for your conditions? Right? So most of us have been kind of programmed for this idea of a big, vast lawn. Right? But is that really what is practical in your area? Lawn is going to be what's going to pull so much of your water. So you can reduce that a little bit. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. You do need to consider, do you have sun? Do you have shade? And that's the biggest thing that we need to look at, because if you've got full sun, you don't want to plant St. Augustine. And if you've got full shade, you're not going to want to plant Bermuda. So you've got to look at those kinds of things. Lawns take more water than anything else in the landscape. Lawns are the #1 irrigated crop in the U.S. We use more water on our lawns than corn, wheat, and fruit orchards combined. That's a lot of water. California's figuring that out the hard way. Okay, try to reduce your lawn. Look for places where the lawn isn't thriving. Think about ground covers. Expand existing flower beds. Add some hardscaping. Like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in my second session. So, water efficiently. What are the coolest part of the day? Now, they'll tell you these days that the coolest part of the day is before 10 o'clock in the morning and after 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Watch your thermometer. That is not accurate. It's going to be cooler at noon than it is at 6 or 7 o'clock. So I try to water early in the morning, as early as I can, and I don't water in the evening. Now, if you've got an automatic sprinkler system that'll come on at night, that's great. I don't. My husband says he's not going to put in an automatic sprinkler system until I quit digging up the yard to put in with the flower beds. So I don't know when that's going to be, but eventually I'll run out of space maybe. I don't know. But if you're a dragon hose like I am, it's much better to do it in the morning. And there are ways that you can water even if you don't have a fancy sprinkler system without necessarily dragging hose all the time. Maintain your sprinkler systems. How many of you have ever been driving down the road and seen somebody's automatic sprinkler system and one of the heads is shooting straight up in the air or straight out into the road? You do have to maintain them, check on them beginning of the season and periodically throughout the season. Especially if it's running at night, you're probably not going to be noticing if it's doing something crazy. So check it periodically. Use soaker hoses and drip irrigation. Timers can keep you from overwatering. Yeah, I do that all the time. I turned it on, my husband would come in, did you know you still have water running? Dang it. And I got to go out and turn it off. So we do have some timers on some things, and I'm going to have to get some more. Don't water the street. A little bit in the street is fine, because we have to water the edges a little bit, otherwise it gets crispy. But you definitely don't want it running into the street and running down the street, down the gutter. That's bad. An inch a week is really all you need. If you have plants that need more than an inch a week, I would recommend one of two things. Put them in a flower pot so that you can water it directly, or switch it out for something else. I do have some tropical kinds of things. I've got them in big flower pots. Okay, so use your mulch. Mulch conserves moisture, moderates soil temperatures, helps control weeds. Try living mulch, which is ground covers. Use 2 to 4 inches of mulch. Make sure you don't mound the mulch up around the base of your trees, base of plants, especially your trees. So, volcano, no. Donut, yes. Okay. And I see professional landscapers do this all the time. They just mound that mulch up around the base of the tree, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that tree's not long for this world. because it'll get all sorts of problems when you do that. So you want this, not this. Appropriate maintenance. Now I showed you my other grandson, so I have to get equal time to my oldest grandson. There he is. He's helping me in the alley. He took a break to blow dandelions because he loves dandelions. So mow regularly, but let your grass grow to the maximum recommended height. That allows it to shade the roots, and it's going to need a little less water. Mulch once a year. Eliminate plants that don't do well. Walk through your yard regularly and nip problems in the bud. Okay, I was talking to some of the master gardeners about a little issue I'm having with mealy bugs right now. And I can tell you this, if I don't do something about it this weekend, it's not going to get better on its own. Chances are. Now what I'm going to do, I haven't decided exactly, but I got to do something. Otherwise they're going to be all over the place. Same thing with spider mites. So Waterwise Gardening, it'll allow you to enjoy your garden with less work and give you more time to do other things, like spend it with your grandchildren. Aren't they adorable? All right, so some other sources real quick. I like to give people sources because I'm one of those people who wants to go and read up more about it. So Native American Seed has a wonderful catalog. You can order it, it's free. It has all sorts of articles as well as what they sell. So it's useful even if you don't decide to buy anything, but it has lots of information. Wild Seed Farm also is a good place for buying stuff and getting information. They've got lots of books there. That's in Fredericksburg. Author Pam Pennick has 2 books that I use. One is called Long Gone, and the other one is Water Saving Garden. Both of them very good. She's out of Austin. So they get a little bit more water than us, but I feel like it's much better to read something by a Texan than say somebody who's doing gardening in Wisconsin. It's different. So I like Texas authors for a lot of gardening things. Okay, this is also the save the dates for our other workshops. We are right here June 25th. We've got 2 more coming up. And then of course also in October we're going to have our plant sale. So we'll talk more about that a little bit. All right. I think that's it. Let me check, see if I got another. Oh yeah, there it is. Big Country Master Gardener Fall Plant Sale, October 15th. Sometimes I forget where my slides end. Pretty sure this is the end. Okay, real quick, do we have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Where do the mealybugs and spider mites come from?
I was going to say HE double hockey sticks, but I think they come from Satan, but I don't know. It's one of those things, I'm pretty sure the mealybugs that are in my yard probably came in on a plant. I probably picked up a plant somewhere, because the first thing I saw it on was a potted plant, and I'm pretty sure they spread from there.
So our lantanas, they've been there since before we moved here.
Yeah,
But then one year, last year, it was covered.
with spider mites, yeah.
Where's they from?
Spider mites is one of the few things, I tend to be fairly organic, okay? I'm not an extremist, but I try not to use chemicals in my yard because I butterfly garden. I garden for wildlife. But when it comes to spider mites, that's the nuclear option. I usually go with chemicals because there's just hardly any other way to get rid of them. But when I do use chemicals, I use it very judiciously. I use it specifically on the plants that need it. Pick a really calm day or early in the morning when things are not moving around a lot and do it at that time. But yeah. And when we have heat like this, we're going to have more problems with native insects that are native here. We're probably going to have grasshoppers if you haven't got them already.
Yeah, they're already here.
Yeah. I don't have them as bad in town, at least not yet, as folks in the country do. But they love hot, dry weather, and so do spider mites. Mealybugs usually like a little bit more moisture, so I'm not sure. Like I said, I think it came in on the plant, and it's just, they multiply very quickly. So, like I said, I haven't figured out exactly what I'm going to do, but I'll do something. Yes, ma'am.
What do you do if your ground is so hard you can't even mix in any compost or amendments very easily?
Yeah.
How can you bust up this hard clay?
Hard clay. Putting mulch on top, letting that mulch decompose some, that will help a little bit. Pick a day when you've had some rain, it's a cooler day, you've had some rain, about 2 days out. It should be dry enough that you can start putting a shovel in it and it not stick to the shovel. That's the problem with clay. If you try to do it right after rain, it's gone, you know. And just try to put as much stuff as you can. If you put stuff on top, if you put compost on top, it'll break down. It'll eventually start soaking in. But I would say in the fall, after we've got a good rain, try to break it up that way.
Just keep trying.
Yeah, just keep
Yeah.
trying. That's the only thing that I really know. And every once in a while, I'll get into an area in my yard where I've had nothing but lawn, and I'll just go, ching, and that's
Yeah.
about as good as it gets. We were out at the Wasp Museum. They had some prepared beds that I've been working on a little bit. And so we were going to put in a whole bunch of muley grass. And so I told my husband, I said, just bring your auger out. And we'll just, do a whole bunch of holes real quick. And I'll put them in there. And they were beds that had been prepared before, but apparently not the entire bed. Because he would go with that auger, and it would get down about that far, and then he would just start spinning, and it wouldn't go anywhere. And you'd pull it out, and it looked like polished porcelain. I mean, it was shiny, because it had just polished that clay. And I'd say, okay, scoot over then. And he'd scoot over a little while, and then it'd go down. So I don't know how they the previous people prepared the beds, but it was kind of hit and miss. We managed to get all the muley grass in, but we had several holes that were only about that deep, and we just broke them off. Yes, ma'am.
That's one thing that I've discovered is, this last year my husband bought me a bulb drill. And there are two different sizes. There's a great big long one and there's a short one.
Yeah.
I'm using the short one because I don't want to tear the guts out of my husband's
Yeah.
drill. But if, like say, when it gets wet,
Yeah.
like that, you can go and you can just keep plugging holes until you get it disturbed enough that you can get a shovel in there.
Yeah.
How deep is it going down?
Oh, the short one will go down about that far. The long one's got a long shaft on it, but it's also hard on the drill.
Yeah.
And I don't want to replace the drill, so I stay short and make them just short little holes all the way around while it's still wet. And then you can get the shovel in it to start
Yeah.
moving it.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, once you finally get into it, expanded shale, you can purchase easily at any of the nurseries or perhaps at some of the box stores, I don't know. But once I don't have a break necessarily, but once you get that done, I've added a little bit to it, and that will help the absorption even in the clay. And it really is a nice additive along with other things that you would. And then I'll make a commercial here too. If you want to know what kind of soil you have, you probably know you have clay, so that's hard or concrete. But at any rate, we have these, the extension office has these, and we've got some out there for you with the with the instructions on how to get them. And then you send this in, and there's a little fee for doing that you pay, and I don't see it on here, but
I think it's $10.
$10, something to that
Something like
effect.
that.
It may have gone up.
Depends on what the price I think is on,
Okay.
On the directions.
But
that
anyway,
it
you
depends
can
on which
see
soil
that,
sample.
And that really could help you know what additives you might need. And I'll have these back here if you'd like to pick one up with the instructions. That might also help. But that expanded shale is certainly nice. I just added it to some my soils this last year, and I think it's helped with the absorption of what
Yeah.
water we get.
Yeah. It's a rock that they process by heating it, and it kind of becomes real porous. And so what happens is it holds air, water can run through it, and so it looks like almost like pea gravel. It's not very big, and you till it under, and then that will help to make your soil more friable, less gummy and sticky. And that's probably one of the quickest ways to improve your clay. Don't put sand in your clay. That just turns into concrete. So you want organic material, or the expanded shell works pretty well. Yes, ma'am. How do you get rid of grubworms? I dig them up and feed them to the mockingbirds, but there are different kinds of treatments that you can use. My understanding is that if you've got a few, they're not a problem. If you're digging up your flower bed and you're finding 20 or 30 of them, then you probably need to treat it. If you're digging a hole and you find one or two, they're probably not doing a whole lot of damage. But that's what I've been told. But there's some different treatments that you can use, and probably if you hit some of the local nurseries, they can give you some ideas on that. And there may be some organic. Anybody in here tried any organic things to do for grubs? Okay. Karen?
Yeah, I've got some beautiful hibiscus plants.
Mm-hmm.
No buds because the grasshoppers are chewing them up.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for that?
Birds.
I got birds all over.
Yeah, you think that would take care of it. I don't really know. Again, I'm in town, which makes it a little bit different. I do get grasshoppers, but they don't just eat me out of house and home. So I would do a little research online and see what they would recommend. Yes, ma'am.
There's a product called Sayonara,
Sayonara.
and it is organic.
Okay. And does it?
The only place I know you can get it is Macon.
Okay.
Um,
Does it work pretty well for grasshoppers?
Well, it's killed some, you
Okay.
know. I've got a big garden, 30 by 100.
Oh, yeah. That is a big garden. So, when it comes to pest management, I will tend to let nature take its course if I can. Because like I said, I do try to be, I'm organic because I do have I'm certified butterfly garden. And I've got hummingbirds, well, not this summer, but normally I have hummingbirds, I've got lizards and all sorts of stuff. So I try not to use too many chemicals, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. You know? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Potentias, are they native or do they need water?
Which one?
Potassium?
Potinia?
Maybe, yes.
Potinias, I don't believe are native. But they use them a lot around here. And they're not a bad, I think they're, you know. Anybody have any experience with potinias?
Depending on where you are, they're very invasive.
Okay.
But in Texas, I don't think they are. But you might want to check the different kinds because I know that the red leaf Photinia has a tendency to be more of a traveler than something
Yeah.
else.
And I know that there's been some fungus or something that's hit some of them. But I don't remember what, it's fungus or a virus or something that's gotten a lot of them, but I don't know for sure. Yes, sir.
The other question was, you mentioned that once a plant is established,
Mm-hmm.
you water them, you kill them.
Yeah.
Which ones are those?
Well, it kind of depends. One of the things that you kind of have to keep in mind is what kind of plant it is, how big is it. So, for example, with a perennial, usually I think it takes about 3 weeks for them to get established, where a shrub's going to take a little bit longer, tree's going to take probably about a year or so. So trees would take a little more water than others. Afghan tree, I would say probably give it water for about a year. Start out giving it once a day as first couple of weeks, and then go to every other day, and then kind of wean it off after a while. But again, we have lots of resources on Google when we're looking at specific plants about how much water to give them. And that'll help you, if you Google a particular plant, you should be able to find some information on how much water they're going to be needing and that kind of thing. If it's a Texas native, and it's native to our region, it's probably not going to need a ton of water. 1 inch a week should be enough for most things. Yes, ma'am.
I'm your worst questioner. The other thing, another tool in your arsenal of things is a water meter. I have come into religion on water meters.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was overwatering some and underwatering the others, and I finally figured there's got to be a way to do this. And the journal didn't work, so I started using a water meter, and it helps.
Yeah, you can get those online. You just stick them in the ground, and it's going to give you some information about how wet the ground is and things like that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a neighbor who has longleaf pine, and he has like 8 of them in a row. They're 40 feet tall.
Wow.
And they're all dying.
Oh.
Is it a beetle?
Could be. New Mexico's had just, New Mexico and Colorado are having nightmares with the pine beetle.
Pine beetle.
So it could be.
Do they also attack red cedars?
I don't think so.
What about the Afghan pines?
I don't think they've had issues with the Afghan pine, but I don't know that for sure. Yes, sir?
Actually, they have.
Have they? Okay.
There's a problem that's coming in. It's hitting the tops of the pines, and it'll work its way down. So if it's that, there is some information, I think, on some of the A&M sites
Okay.
talking about some of the relief methods that you can do, but there's not much you can do with them,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. It's been a real issue in New Mexico and parts of Colorado. They've lost a lot of trees. It's hitting them like oak wilt's been hitting the hill country. Probably worse.
On his door and say, why are you letting these trees die?
Yeah,
You know,
They
you
probably
saw it happen
yeah.
and did nothing.
And sometimes there's not a lot to do. Sometimes once that virus gets into it, there's not a whole lot you can do. It's really, it can be very, very frustrating. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Where is it that you can buy sayonara?
She said Mako?
Macon.
Macon is on
North First.
North First, Cloak and Leggett, over there where the Whataburger is.
Burger King.
It was-
Yeah, Burger King,
It's
sorry.
about $35.
So it's
And
kind of
supposed to
pricey.
do, I think 100, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, are we gonna take a little break before John starts?
Yeah.
Door
Oh, we're
prices.
gonna do door prices, okay.
Okay, good morning, everybody. John Geib, been a master gardener since about 2014. Learned most of my important information that I'm going to be teaching you today over in Midland, where it is even drier than here by about a factor of 2. So I got real good at doing waterwise gardening around my house. And so one of the things I did learn very early on is irrigation is critically important for how you're going to handle your yard. I'm going to be talking about a bunch of different things today. Why we need to water, how we need to water, when we're going to need to water, best ways to water, and then talk a little bit about fixes and troubleshooting if you've got irrigation systems, and then I'm going to also talk very briefly about some mulch and some of the benefits of that. We do live in a desert, almost. We're right on the border. Midland qualifies as a desert. They get about 13 inches of rainfall. We officially get about 24 in an average year. As anybody that has lived here more than 3 years knows, there is no such thing as an average year here. We either have 36 inches of rain or 10. So, but it's that dry years that really get to us. During the wet years, we have no problems with watering, but it's this dry years like this year that is really going to be a killer for us. So, now, first thing we need to think about, what are we watering, Kathy? Big, huge fields of grass, beautiful fields of flowers. Believe it or not, this will take half as much water as that lawn will.
Wow.
Are you the Arizona person? Now, Beth was saying that, if you like it, that's great, it works here. I found that the xeriscape landscaping around here doesn't work very well. The key problem that we'll have around here is we do get a little bit too much water on some years. And so you'll end up with a very weedy yard during those years. And you can't go out and mow that if you've got a lot of decomposed granite for your front yard. So I would advise doing this if you like it in select areas where you don't mind weeding during the wet years. Or do you have a yard that looks kind of more like mine? Now, I have beautiful flower beds. My grass looks like this in a good year. Okay, this year it looks even worse. Okay, I do not water grass. It is just one of those things. If you live in Abilene, in town or anywhere close to the outskirts, you probably live in a subdivision or what was at one time a subdivision. It means when you were built by the contractors, this is what you were given. If you're a newer subdivision, you look more like the top photo, a house and a whole big flat spot of grass. Why? Grass is cheap for the contractor to put in. A couple of dollars worth of seed and a little bit of water, and then he's done the yard for you. Okay? If you live in the older sections of Abilene, you probably have a yard that looks like the bottom one. House, big flat section of yard, and that one contractor tree that they was planted has grown up a little bit. Okay? Very little difference between everybody's yard. So they all kind of look the same when you look at them from the front. Okay? You drive down a street like this, and this is where a street you live on. It's a little hard to tell where you live. I've actually seen people in subdivisions while they drive by, pull into the neighbor's driveway and go, "Oh wait, wrong one," and then their own house, and they can't even recognize it. So a little bit of good landscaping in front of your yard can really make a huge difference on what your yard's going to look like. This doesn't take a whole lot to do. It's a little bit more expensive with the rock wall, but little patio, little sidewalk right through there, and a lot of flowers, and that will actually save you a lot of money on watering. Even just a little flower bed up in the front can add a real big pop to what your house looks like and how pretty it is, and it doesn't take a lot to keep it maintained. If you don't have kids, think about it. Why do you have the lawn? The contractor put it in the beginning. You've been trained. Lawns are good. Okay? Now, lawns are good if you have kids and you like playing ball with them or going out and letting them play in the yard and run around, that sort of stuff. So I understand having a yard. But if you don't have kids or grandkids, make a little nice oasis in the middle of your backyard. Takes out a lot of lawn. And that lawn takes up a lot of water. So, which we'll get to in a second. First thing to think about though, if we're going to be doing irrigation on our landscape, where are we getting the water? If you live in town, most of your water is going to be coming from the city. Okay? Because it's coming from the city, you're also going to be under any restrictions that the city imposes due to drought conditions. The fact that we have not gone under any drought restrictions yet so far this year is amazing. Okay? I have been very surprised. I think the only reason we haven't is because we had so much rain the last 2 years. If you live out in the country, a lot of times you're going to be running off of a well. Okay? The one problem that you'll run into with well water is that it is usually very high in salts, because it's usually coming from a limestone formation, and so you'll end up with a lot of calcium buildup in a lot of your whatever you're using for irrigation. Rainwater collection is probably the nicest thing you can use for your landscape. One, it doesn't require city water because it is not connected to the city water system. You don't have to play by their drought restriction rules. The big problem that you'll run into is that you need a large system to do this. We'll talk, when we're talking a lot of water to keep a lawn or anything growing nicely in here, we're talking thousands of gallons. So while the rain barrels that we build and recommend as master gardeners, they're great. They work well for small sections. But if you're trying to do a yard or even just a fairly large flower bed, you're going to need to start going with larger scales. And when we start the rainwater collection, a lot of times as master gardeners, it's like, here's your introduction to it. Now let's see if we can take it up to the next level. And if you're going to be doing it for your yard, rainwater collection needs to be taken to a good size level. I live out in the country a bit. I built a barn. When I had the barn built, I made sure that they put gutters in with downspouts, and I have 10,000 gallons of water storage behind my barn, because that's what I'm going to be using for my gardens. Okay? It's just a whole lot better system. The other thing is just let Mother Nature take its course and accept what rainfall comes from the sky. Which this year, yeah, that wouldn't be real good. Okay, so what are we going to be watering in our landscape? Well, we've got the lawn, which as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of lawns. Sorry. Flower beds, which I am a very big proponent of, because It gets a lot of color, a lot of visual appeal, and it doesn't take a whole lot of water usually, especially if done right. Got trees. Trees are one of the key things that we love in our landscape. Improves our home values, gives us shade, can give us things like pecans or fruit, that sort of stuff. So trees can be real important. If you've got a water feature, that little oasis that I was talking about earlier in your backyard, a lot of times will have a water feature in it. So, I mean, how are we going to keep that watered and full of water? So, and then this year especially, a lot of people have been talking about putting in vegetable gardens. Vegetable gardens, you can't miss watering when it comes to vegetable gardening. You don't have a choice. Otherwise, you're not going to get any vegetables out. So how do we water our yard? Wrong question. Correct question is, how much do you water your yard? Okay? It's going to depend on a bunch of different things. First thing is type of grass. Okay? As master gardeners, we recommend 4 basic types of grass that are work well, especially in our drought areas. They're Bermuda grass, especially if you like a thin-bladed grass. St. Augustine, if you like larger, the wide-bladed grass. You've got zoysia, which is a bit expensive usually to put in, but it can save you in watering. And there are both wide and narrow-bladed varieties of zoysia. And then the other one that we recommend is buffalo grass, which is narrow-bladed grass. It's a little bit clumpy, but once it gets well established, it can be as beautiful along as anything else. And it takes almost no water, even in drought conditions, to keep that looking reasonably decent. Next thing is going to depend on how much you're going to water your yard is going to be the weather. Is it 105 degrees, 5% humidity, and 30-mile-an-hour winds like we've been experiencing? You're going to have to water more. If it's cool and cloudy, you don't need to water as much. So this is one of the things we need to think about. This is one of the things we can't control, but it's something we need to think about. Springtime, we get a lot of dry, windy weather, so we need to water a little bit heavier in the spring and the summer. Unfortunately, the summer and spring is when we really shouldn't be watering too much. But do you have sun or shade where you're trying to be watering your lawn? Okay. Most lawns do not do well in heavy shade. In fact, none of them that I know of do. But if it's in a full sun area, which Bermuda will require, you're going to have to water just a little bit more, just because of it's going to dry out a little faster. Okay. On average, you're going to need about 1 inch of moisture on your grass per week. Doesn't matter the variety. Of those 4, they'll range anywhere from a ½ inch, if you're talking about the buffalo grass, up to about 1.25 inches, inch to 1.25 inches for the St. Augustine. And these will keep the grass beautiful and healthy looking. Now this is moisture. It doesn't need necessarily irrigation from you, but if we do get some rainfall, that can be taken into account for that inch of moisture. So, any questions so far? Okay, so how much are we watering? Well, typical lot has not changed in Abilene in about the past 50 years, from what I've seen. I've done some studies on everything. Typical lot is running right now 65 feet by 125 feet. Okay, that's 0.2 acres or about 8,100 square feet. If we take out of that the 1,600 square foot-ish for the house, 2-car garage, the driveway, some sidewalk area, we're looking at about 5,000 square feet of landscape that we need to take care of for watering. All right? If we're watering about 1 inch a week on that lawn, which most of it is, that boils down to about 12,000 gallons of water that your grass is going to need to grow properly. Yeah. Now, you don't water that much, grass won't look as good, but it still may live. So, but this is what the grass actually needs to be growing well. Okay, so this is why water-wise landscaping can be important, especially getting rid of lawn. Now, how are we watering our lawns? Well, if you're lucky enough to have a sprinkler system, which is great, there's a couple of different types that you can get. You can get the little pop-up ones. Okay, these are very typical. You can buy them at Lowe's, Home Depot, any of the big stores. When the sprinkler system goes off, the pressure from that pops up the head. Okay, and then when the pressure goes off, it pops down. Okay, they're very efficient for distributing the water. Efficient is probably not the right word, I should say. It is very good at getting the water out from the pipes out towards the yard. Not necessarily into the yard, but towards the yard. Okay? These type of pop-up sprinklers, what they have is a little slit in them, and there's no control mechanism on it other than that slit for how much pressure is onto it. So as soon as you put on the pressure, it blasts the water through this little teeny slit, and you usually end up with a very fine mist coming out from it. Okay? That fine mist evaporates very well, which is the big problem. These pop-up sprinkler heads are about 50% water efficient. So for every gallon you put out of these, about half a gallon ends up going to your grass. These should be thrown away. Okay? This one is a slightly different version of a pop-up sprinkler. Okay, this is for a larger area, but it's the same basic thing. But it's called a rotary sprinkler. Okay? Head will pop up, and it will do a nice little stream of water, like you see in the lower picture there, where the water droplets are much larger. Not nearly as much water evaporation before it hits the ground. These are about 75% water efficient to get water to your yard. So they're a whole lot better for you, but they aren't too bad. The other one I list up there is what I call a manual sprinkler. These could be anything from the little tractors that you'll see with the blade that spins around that sprays water out. Those actually aren't too bad. Or the other ones are the big fan versions that you used to love to play in when you were a kid. Those are very water inefficient also because while it's got the big drops, it sprays it up so high, the wind will blow it away a lot of times, so it's not landing where you need it to, or it just has enough time to, before it falls to the ground, to evaporate quite a bit. So those are the big sprinkler versions that you can do. You can water by hand. Okay. Now, if you're going to water by hand, I'm going to recommend that you use a wand with a rain head on it. You know, what looks like kind of like a shower head coming off. Those are the best ways to do it because you're going to control how much water goes onto the ground in all of the area. The problem is it takes a while to put enough water onto your grass that most people don't have the time to do that. So what will they do? They'll go out, they'll take their hose, get a phone call, they'll drop the hose on the ground and let the water run out of the hose while they go talk on the phone, and then they forget about I was watering, and let me go back 30 minutes later, and water is like 12 houses down in the gutter. Okay? Hand watering works well if you can do it with the wands. If you're not going to do it with the wand, it's almost better if you don't water. Water will find the lowest point. Well, the lowest point in your yard is the gutter. Okay, so as you water, all the water will slowly work itself out to the gutter. So if you aren't being careful with it and keeping a good close eye on it, you're going to end up watering the street and not the plants. Okay? Drip irrigation is the one I'm going to really harp on as the one that you really want to do. Okay? There are several types of drip irrigation. Personally, I like what we call the inline water systems. Okay, like this. You'll see these a lot of times in businesses and stuff where they've been installed at best poorly. Okay, usually when they're put in like the little islands that you see in the middle of the parking lot. you know, where they're raised up and everything, and so everything, once it gets rained on, everything falls off, and then you get to see the sprinkler system. You know, if they cut out 3 inches of dirt and put that as a small lake instead of a big tall island, it would save a whole lot, it would be a whole lot better for them, but nobody installs them that way. These work well. You can get a little distribution system that you can make up. They've got little fittings that they work with, and what they do is they've got a little emitter in it. I've got some parts I can show. You can come up and take a look here after the presentation. And then it's got a single dripper on the thing. And these will run about every foot along your installation. And it will put out a gallon of water per hour. Not per minute, per hour. And that slow drip will slowly soak into your soil with almost zero evaporation. And if you do this right, and especially right around your plants, you're going to water only the plants that you want and nothing else. So in years like this, even the weeds don't grow. Okay, so that's the nice thing about these. So there's one other type of irrigation, drip irrigation that you can get. They'll usually run in with some sort of a distribution hub that hooks into your, like a sprinkler system, underground sprinkler system a lot of times. And then you get the octopus that comes off of it. And what these will do is you'll have a dripper at the end that you'll plant right next to your plant, and that's what actually gets the water to your plants. These work reasonably well, but it can be a little bit of a pain to try and deal with the spaghetti. So, the inline stuff you can run long distances also. So if you've got a small contained area, sometimes the spaghetti version will work a little bit better. So, if you do have a sprinkler system, one of the big problems is knowing how much you're actually putting out for water onto your yard. If you're just installing the system, each of these little sprinkler heads on them will have listed somewhere on the label just how much water they put out per minute. Okay, so you can calculate how much water is going out onto the yard for every minute that you're running the system, and then you can take the area that circle of moisture is covering and calculate how much rainfall is actually hitting your yard. If you already have one installed and you don't want to dig up all your system to figure out how much they're putting out, you can do what we call the tuna can method. You take something that is a small can, like a tuna can or a catfish or cat food can, something usually fairly low and also with straight sides. Run your sprinkler system for a set period of time, and you'll get a certain amount of water into your tuna can, and then you can base that on how long you want to actually run your sprinkler to get your 1 inch per week. Yes, ma'am?
How far away from the hedge would you put the can?
Usually you would scatter them out. So if you have a well-designed system, which is the pictures up there, it shouldn't matter where you put that. Okay. Most sprinkler systems that are designed by homeowners, unfortunately, will run just like you see on the right there, where they say, okay, I've got a sprinkler head that'll put out a 4 foot diameter or 4 foot radius circle. So they'll go 4 feet out and then 4 feet beyond that to the next one. And so you get the circles will touch at a certain point, but there's no overlap. Okay, and so what you end up actually doing is getting dead spots in between the sprinkler heads. How a sprinkler system should be designed is this sprinkler head should spray far enough to touch this sprinkler head. Okay, that gives you a full overlap, and it'll look more like the picture on the left. Okay, that gives you a much better coverage. This is why I said it shouldn't matter where the tuna cans are. Okay, because it should cover nicely. But this will give you an idea of how much actual rainfall you're going to get on your yard. If you're doing by the gallon method, just to let you know, 0.6 gallons per square foot. Yeah. Yeah, 0.6 gallons per square foot is 1 inch of rainfall. So That's one of the big contributing things. Now, if you're going to be doing drip irrigation, you can actually do drip irrigation in your yard. Works very well. You will never see the drip irrigation system running, hopefully, unless the squirrels get to it. That's the one big problem with drip irrigation. Squirrels love trying to chew on to get the water. So, but as you see, this is a well-done system for drip irrigation. They're run about 1 foot apart. They will have drip emitters about every foot, so you'll run a section like this for an hour. That entire area will get 1 inch of rainfall straight to the roots of the plant. Because as you can see, they've got the sod sitting there ready to go on top of the drip irrigation system. So this works well, especially if you're doing a new install. If you're doing a install on top of something that you've already got existing, if you cut your grass a little tall for about 3 months after you've installed your system, you can stretch these out right on top of the grass. Just kind of keep them pinned in nice and tight to the ground so you don't mow over them and cut them apart, which I've done before. In fact, this week I did that. But you know, you run these out and you can cover the grass very nicely. And then after about 3 months, there's enough buildup of lawn clippings that it actually will pretty much cover over the drip irrigation system. And within a year or two, you won't even be able to see. You'll have to dig to find the irrigation system. So, when do you water? Best time to water for your yard is going to be in the early morning. And we're talking, you know, there's a couple of reasons for this. 1, it's cooler. 2, it's usually a little more humid. And 3, there's almost no wind, usually, right around dawn. So that's the best time to water your yard. Next best time is going to be the evening. Evening works better for a lot of people because they're actually home at night. So they want to go out and do their lawn. So that works well. The one thing you want to think about though, you want to water as late as possible to get as cool and as less windy as possible. But you also want to make sure that once you do water, there's enough time for the water that is on the plants to evaporate off. Okay? Cool, wet environments are very conducive for fungal and disease issues on your grass. So, you know, you want to try and make sure that you don't leave a wet grass overnight. Okay, it's very bad for the lawn. I usually run my sprinkler systems when I have them on automatic timers, usually about 5 in the morning. That way they get run. Before I get up, I can check. You know, when I go to work, you know, you get up, you know it was supposed to rain today, or the sprinkler system was supposed to work, and you go outside and you go, oh look, there's a big puddle in my front yard. I've got a sprinkler head that wasn't working. Be conscious of this. You know, this is part of the troubleshooting. Think about things when you're doing this. So if there's a big puddle in your yard after you run the sprinkler in the middle of the night, check your system. You've got a problem. So usually we're going to want to water about once per week. Okay. The longer we can go between waterings and get a good watering and put that 1 inch per week equivalent onto your yard, the more the roots for the grass will grow down. The longer the roots are underground, the better chance they have to survive droughts. Okay. If the roots are in the top ½ inch of the soil, when you get temperatures like we have been having with no moisture, a lot of times the grass will actually die because the roots, it's just literally baked the roots to death. Okay? So we want to get those roots as deep as possible so they can get even just a little bit of residual moisture to keep alive. Now, if we're going on to flower beds, okay? Very similar when we're talking irrigation for flower beds as we are for lawns. Key thing is, water will depend on what the varieties are. Some plants will require more water than others. Some will require little or no water. Most of our native and adaptive plants can survive on almost no water unless we are in severe drought like we are right now. Okay? They are the ones that are especially native plants for around here as opposed to adaptive. The natives are very used to seeing a month, month and a half without water and then seeing 3 inches of water. So they're a little bit more adapted to be able to handle the drought and flood conditions that we have. This is one of the reasons why we always recommend natives. Same basic rules as lawn when it comes to when to water, how we're going to be watering, and then how much we're going to water. Like Beth was saying, 1 inch per week during the heavy growing season is usually going to be more than enough to keep your plants growing and looking beautiful. The one thing about flower beds that I point out, remember I was mentioning that beautiful flower bed that takes half as much water? My flower bed, I took out a large section of lawn last year, 2 years ago I guess now, because I wasn't going to water it. I knew I wasn't going to water it because I don't like lawns. I like pretty flowers. Okay? So, pulled it out, got rid of all the grass, mulched the bed heavily, and then planted flowers. Okay? I'm using a drip irrigation system on these. I'm watering once a week for 1 hour, give it that 1 inch of rainfall. Now, I've got an area that's probably the first 2 rows of the area here and about as long. Most of that is mulch. I've got plants here and there that are still growing to their full mature size, but I'm not watering all the mulch. I'm just watering where the plants are. So I've got a rose bush here. I've got 6 drip emitters right around that one small rose bush that gives me a 2-foot diameter circle of wet for that rose bush. But that rose bush covers about when it gets full grown, it'll cover 4 or 5 feet across in all directions. But I'm watering 1/4 of the ground under it. Okay? So I'm watering the plant, I'm not watering the whole ground. So that rose bush will actually take about 1/4 of the water that area would have taken if I'd left it as long. This is how you can get very water-wise and water-efficient gardens, is if you plant plants, especially larger ones, that spread a bit and make this beautiful canopy over the ground, but they don't need anything but the small little area right around the base watered. So, yes, ma'am?
You said get all the grass out. How do you get that stupid Bermuda out? That is not a gardener's friend.
No. I spent quarantine with a sprayer full of Roundup every other week. So, I mean, there's 2 ways to get rid of Bermuda. Roundup works well. For those that don't like Roundup because of some of the effects of it. The other way to do it would be water the area, especially if it's clay soil like I have, and it's very hard to break up. Water it, but not a whole lot, just enough so you can start to work the soil. And then go in with a pitchfork and dig down about a full pitchfork's level, about 8 inches. Break it up, and then start hand pulling. I've done that before to an area, and probably about 2 tables in width. It took a while for me to go through and sort through all of the dirt and get all of the roots out from the Bermuda. But the Bermuda never came back because I made sure I got all the roots out. It's not pleasant and it's not fun.
No.
That's why I went with the Roundup this time, because it was like, it's a whole lot easier.
You broke it up with a pitchfork there. What did you do?
I just went through the ground and just pulled all the Bermuda grass out. It's not fun. It's one of those ones that it's very labor intensive, but it is very effective. It's the only organic way that I know of to kill Bermuda pests, guaranteed. Yes, ma'am.
What about the cardboard method, where you put cardboard and then also put top of it?
Okay, the cardboard method for taking out Bermuda does not work. To give you an idea, I've put some raised beds in, had probably 3 inches of cardboard in the bottom of my raised beds, filled them up with dirt, and I ended up with Bermuda that grew through 1.5 feet of dirt and then came out in the middle of my raised bed. And yeah, it's nearly impossible to get it out. So, yes, ma'am.
What if I use that black plastic?
The weed barrier does not work for Bermuda. It will work for most other plants, but it will not work for Bermuda. Bermuda will just go right through. So,
The only other way you could do is something called solarization. And basically, you wet down your grass really, really good. You take a big chunk of clear plastic, you lay it down on the ground, take a water hose around the edge of that plastic to seal it down, and leave it there in the heat of summer for about 3 or 4 months.
yeah, and solarization will work, but it will kill most of the time. But it's not guaranteed to get everything.
Very time consuming also.
Yeah, and you've got to be prepping for this year for next year's garden, basically. Okay, trees. Watering your trees, don't want to lose your trees during the drought because they take 30 years to regrow a lot of times. So we don't want to lose them. So we are going to want to water them. Same basic rules are going to apply. The key thing about trees, water at what we call the drip line. Okay? The drip line is, you go under a tree when it's raining because it performs a nice little umbrella effect on you, right? Well, that effect is nature's way of concentrating the water for the tree. Okay? Takes all the water that fell over the area of the tree, drops it into this little line right around where the edge of the canopy is, and that's where all the roots are that absorb all the nutrients and the moisture. Okay? So, those people that use these like bags that you hang on a tree to slow drip your do a nice slow watering of your tree, those work well while your trees are sticks. Okay? Once your tree has grown even a little bit, you should not use those because the water needs to be moving out for the tree to grow properly. Okay? One of the nice things about watering a drip line like this, especially in drought conditions, one of the ways that you're allowed to water pretty much under all drought conditions, except we're going to die because we have 0 water left, drought restriction, you can always hand water. Okay? You can always water by drip irrigation. Okay? Those are not restricted. So, one of the nice things, you take a 5-gallon bucket, drill a couple of holes in it, or if it's got a big crack in the bottom of it, those work well. Go around the drip line and you place a bucket about every 3 or 4 feet all the way around the drip line, and then you walk around with your hose and you fill up the 5-gallon bucket on each bucket all the way around. It'll slowly drip out of that bucket and water your trees. It's one of the nice ways to water your tree. Yes, ma'am?
So do you water just around the drip line, or do you go drip line into within a couple of feet of the trunk?
Mainly right around the drip line. That's where almost all of the roots
okay.
are
I
at.
thought you had to go in just a little bit.
You can go in a little bit, it's not going to hurt any, but most of the roots are right there, right around the drip line. And the drip line will cover, a 3 or 4 foot wide section. So it's not, if it's a bigger tree at least. So, any questions?
Would a soaker hose be good for that? Put
Yes.
ring around it?
You could use a soaker hose right around the drip line, it would work very well.
How efficient are they? Are they essentially like a drip system?
Depends on how efficient, depends on how abused the drip system is. The one problem with soaker hoses, especially if you're using well water and a little bit with city water, is they tend to get clogged up and they stop becoming a drip style soaker hose and become a spray hose. You'll see the pores will get clogged up, and so what used to be a medium-sized hole is now a pinhole, and so it sprays out this fine mist of water. That's the one big problem with soaker hoses.
Do you have to use a pressure regulator?
I don't know on that one. I don't use soaker hoses enough to do it. If you have something that can reduce the pressure when it goes to that soaker hose, that would actually be a good thing to prevent it from going quite so sprayed, even with the reduced hole size. Anything else?
John,
Yes, sir.
so you mentioned that you have a drip system,
Yeah.
you actually get a gallon of water per hour.
Yes.
Do you have a regulator for that to or minimize the pressure from the?
The drip system that I use actually does, they say it should be about a gallon per hour at 20 psi. Okay, so I will have an inline pressure regulator on that to make sure that I do have the right pressure. If it's a higher pressure, like straight out of the tap faucet, it will be a higher drip rate. So, but it can also do damage to it if it's too high of a pressure. So, yes, ma'am.
Where do you put your pressure?
Pressure regulator I usually use right off of where, most of the time, depends on it. If I'm doing an irrigation system where it's an automated system, I'll usually put the pressure regulator upstream of all the valves and everything just so I can use one pressure regulator. But if I'm doing something like a hose connected to a faucet that runs into a drip irrigation system, a lot of times I'll just do one on the system I'm using, because a lot of times the other connections I have to that faucet may be running actual hoses instead of a drip irrigation system. So. Okay, water features. If you have a small water feature, the best thing you're probably going to do is by hand. Okay. It's going to be one of those you're going to have to keep an eye on and monitor and water it by hand just to make sure it's got enough water in it. If you're doing a larger water feature, a lot of times you can do a float system in that, but be careful with that. If you're noticing a spot near your water feature that's getting very green, you might have a leak in your float system. Float systems are notorious for going bad and you never noticing them. Okay, so they'll leak like a toilet will leak, very slow. You won't even notice it, but suddenly you're using 3 times as much water this month than you used last month. Okay, so you keep an eye on it. If you do have a water feature, especially a larger one, a lot of times keeping it in shade will help prevent some evaporation out of that. Also keep the water cooler for if you have fish or something like that. Also, if you can put a wind block on the southwest corner, that would be useful. Southwest is where we get most of our wind from, and so if you can put some plants, taller plants, as a little wind block right there, that'll help prevent some of the water evaporation. Yes, ma'am?
What about if it's green, the algae or something from the sun, I guess?
Usually the only thing I know of that you can do on that is going to be like fish to help eat off some of the algae. You could bleach it, but of course then you now have bleach water out in your yard, so that's usually not a good thing. Those are the only things I really know of to work on that. I'm not really that much of an expert on the ponds and that sort of thing. So.
There's a couple of algaecides that you can get that are safe for fish.
Or this just fountain, no fish or anything in it, and so I was gonna bleach it, but I wasn't sure it's okay on the pump.
A light bleach on a pump probably is not going to hurt it. The one thing you want to think about is are you going to have birds and bees in there? And if you've got birds and bees in there, they're not going to like the bleach water anymore. So.
John, I think they make something like a dunk that we use for mosquitoes that's for algae.
Okay.
And it says something about safe for fish and birds.
Okay. Yeah, that would probably be one of the algaecides. Yes, ma'am.
We just have a little small fiberglass kind of thing,
Yeah.
but I was experiencing the same thing. And he went online and got like a thing he would put in the fish tank.
Okay.
And so put that in there, and he sets it however long we want it to stay on. And maybe, I mean, it really has reduced how often I have to
Clean it out.
empty it and
Yeah.
clean it out.
Yeah, the algaecides, I haven't, like I said, I don't deal with the ponds very much. So I don't know about it, but I'm sure there's some algicides that you could probably use. The water containers I use out in my yard are for my animals, and so every week or so I'll actually scrub them out. So but I'm changing out the water daily anyhow. So algae is not much of an issue for me, unfortunately. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with it. Okay, is there anything else? No, I think that was it. Okay. Vegetables, okay? Here's one of the ones where I really will harp on you for which way you water. Drip or hand watering on your vegetables. Do not use sprinkler systems on your vegetables. Many of the vegetables, tomatoes especially, do not like to get wet. They will spread viruses very easily that way, and a lot of times just that extra moisture on the plant will produce molds, mildews, and help the spread of viruses. Drip or hand watering only on your vegetables, okay? At least if you want to get lots of vegetables. Okay, now rule of thumb is not an inch per week, but it's more closer to an inch and a half. But it also depends on the vegetable. Some vegetables will require more, some will require less, some will require more at certain times of the year. So it gets very hit or miss on what you want to do. The one thing that I do know with tomatoes, even watering is critical. If you try more of a once per week type thing with vegetables like tomatoes, you'll end up with split tomatoes. So an every other day type of watering for the tomatoes is better, okay? Because you want to keep that soil moist, otherwise you're going to get very quick expansion of the tomatoes and they split. Cucumbers take a lot of water and require a very consistent water also, otherwise you get bitter tasting cucumbers. Got to remember, this is moisture plus whatever falls from the sky plus whatever you're putting on, okay? So the one problem with tomatoes I've found, especially around here, is when you have watered yesterday and then you get a 3-inch rainfall as the thunderstorm blows over and all of your tomatoes explode. So it's one of those things. You just have to kind of play around with it sometimes. This is how much water your particular vegetables require over the season that they're growing, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. One of the neat ones to think about, look at the watermelons. It's called a watermelon. It does not require that much water. Okay. Onions actually require very little water. It's only about a 1/2 inch per week for an onion if you calculate it out. So they can handle a lot drier conditions than some of the other things. Potatoes, on the other hand, are a little bit more water intensive. They're about 1.5 inches, almost 3 1.75 inches per week while they're growing. So, any questions on vegetables? Yes?
Is this during normal years or?
This is what the plant requires.
Okay.
So if we're getting a lot of moisture, we don't have to do excess irrigation a lot of times. The one key thing on that is like the tomatoes and cucumbers. We want to keep those evenly watered regardless.
Okay.
So, now, for more information on the vegetables, next month's Saturday seminar is going to be on vegetables. So if you want a lot more information on vegetables, we'll be dealing with that next month. Tips and troubleshooting. Key things. Make sure you're watering your plants. No matter how much you water concrete, it won't grow. Okay? So if you've got a sprinkler system, make sure it's adjusted so that it's spraying on the grass or plants. Okay? Drip irrigation is one of the best ways to avoid watering things that aren't the plants, because you're concentrated where you want the water. If you're using the big, like the manual type sprinkler systems, think about, as the wind blows, which way is that water going to blow off? You don't want to be watering things that you don't want to. If you've got a sprinkler system and a controller, automatic controller, learn how to use it. They usually are not that hard. But being able to control it and control it right to get the right amount of water out on your yard is critical. Okay. If you do have a sprinkler system, a lot of times the rainwater sensors can be very useful also. That they'll shut off your sprinkler system for a set period of time if you've actually gotten rain. So you don't, water the same day or the next day after you've had a 3-inch rainfall, something like that. Test your sprinklers at least monthly. Like I said, we've all seen, driven down the road and seen the sprinkler running with the big fountain out. We don't like those. So once a month at least during, while you're using the system, run out, run through your sprinkler system, make sure all of the sprinkler heads are working properly, make sure they're watering where they're supposed to. If you've got drip systems, it's a little bit harder to determine with the drip system. A lot of times what you actually have to do is go out and listen for it, because you'll hear the water flowing where it shouldn't be. When you turn on a drip system, the inline drip systems, you literally hear the water flowing through the lines until it gets to the end, because it's pushing out all the air that's in the lines, and then it'll start running. Well, if you still hear something after the first initial run through, you're like, there's a leak somewhere and I gotta go find it. But because a lot of times you've got your drip system under mulch, you won't even notice until then. Just a brief summary, this is what we've talked about. Any other questions generally on irrigation? Yes, ma'am.
What about buying that ground set?
Yeah, that's one thing I do need to point out. The drip irrigation stuff, the inline drip irrigation, I would not get from the big box stores. That is the low, cheap, consumer grade type stuff. It does not work very well. It has a tendency to spring leaks, to blow fittings out, that sort of stuff. Go to one of the irrigation supply stores. There's several in town that will carry that, and that is the good stuff. It's a little bit more expensive, not much, but a little bit more expensive, but the heartache you will save is well worth it. So. Yes, ma'am.
Does it make a difference whether you're watering at night or during the day?
For drip irrigation, it doesn't. If you're doing like an overhead sprinkler, you usually don't want to do it during the day because you're going to lose a lot more moisture to evaporation. So early morning, dawn, that type time frame, or as hour before sunset type time frame usually will work pretty well. So, yes, ma'am.
I know you said you weren't a big fan on the soaker hoses, but I know there's two types of soaker hoses. There's a firm round circle, and then the flat ones.
Yes.
Which one, in your opinion, do you feel is better than the other?
I'm going to say probably the flat one, and the reason is when it goes flat and that flex in it may break up some of the chemical, the calcium deposits that are going to form, and so it'll probably not get as much problem as getting soaked up and becoming a white hose, basically, from all the calcium. Any more questions
Okay,
on?
so,
Comment on that is squirrels have a tendency to chew through the rubber ones more than the flat ones, is what I have found.
Okay, yeah, squirrels will sometimes chew through the harder ones more than the other ones. One thing I do want to mention on squirrels and drip irrigation, well, I'll get to you in a second. If you leave a water source out for the squirrels, a lot of times they won't mess with your irrigation system as much. They still may do it, but they will have a tendency to try and find water wherever they can get it. So, a small pan here or there out for the squirrels to get water, especially if it's in a semi-hidden location from the field. It's going to be someplace they may want to go get the water instead of your drip irrigation system. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm trying to picture the components of this inline system that you might need. So what I'm hearing you say is it would be good to have a pressure regulator at the source.
Yeah, come in, pressure regulator.
And then you have your hose, and then you have a main line?
Usually you come off of it depends on how you have it. If you've got a sprinkler system, an in-ground system, what you'll do is you'll have the tap where you're going to be getting your water from. You'll put your pressure regulator, and then you'll have a valve, possibly a manifold to spread out to a couple of different sections. Your valves to run all of the sections, and then you'll have a hose. I call it hose. It's not really a hose. It's the inline system, but it's a blank. It doesn't have any actually emitters, and you can run that for 100 feet, and then have like an area that you actually water.
So you need enough of that main hose to get from your water source to the farthest thing you're trying to water?
Well, to the beginning of where you're going to start watering, and then you can do that whole section as a water.
Okay.
So.
And then you have these little smaller micro tubes branching off of that
If
main
you
line
need to,
hose?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You never hook it to a garden hose?
Well, like I said, mine, what I usually do is I actually hook it to the faucet right outside the house.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
I could, if I wanted to, run a hose out and then you start the drip irrigation system out further out. But I usually want to try and keep everything close to the house so I can, turn things off. So, which can be an issue. Sometimes you'll forget to turn things off and you'll let them run for a while. So I want to be able to get to them easily. So.
On the drip irrigation, how far apart are the little holes? And are they all that way?
You can get several different types. For the most part, they're going to sell them to you around here with 1 foot spacing on the drip emitters, which is what you usually want. Because after an hour, it will soak a 1 foot circle. And so you'll end up with a good coverage. One more quick slide. Mulch. Mulch is our friend. Okay. Usually when we're talking mulch, we're looking at 3 to 4 inches of organic material, usually wood chip mulch, straw, something like that. This is not the inch to 1.5 inches that most people will put on. Okay? We want 3 to 4 inches. It does several things. One, it prevents water evaporation, so what water you do put in stays in the ground for the most part. It doesn't evaporate out, especially with the wind. Okay? It keeps the ground cooler or warmer, depending on the season, on the order of up to 30 degrees. Middle of summer right now, I can pull my mulch back, and it will be in the low to mid 70s underneath my mulch. So it's much nicer for the plants. Okay. Organic material will break down over time, and so you'll end up with better soil over time, which is very useful. Yes, ma'am.
Does the color of the mulch matter?
No, it does not. One thing I will mention, I usually, if I'm doing mulch in my vegetable gardens, I will not go with the colored mulch, just because I don't know what the stains are and whether they're good for me in my vegetables.
What about that rubberized mulch?
You can use the rubberized mulch. It will do the first 2 things, but it won't do the third, because it doesn't break down.
Oh, yeah.
So, and the more it breaks down over time, the more it'll improve the soil. The soil will be able to hold more moisture long term. So.
That was the same question
Okay.
I had.
Yes, Karen.
If it doesn't break down, then what? Then you just have to continue to use the plastic over it, or else you have to dig it all out and then...
Yeah, I mean, if you've got the rubberized mulch, you can either leave it there, it'll stay there for a while. Eventually, it will break down a little bit and be kind of crumbly a little bit, so you may not want to, after 5-6 years, you may want to try and see what you can do about scraping it out, especially if you want to switch over to an organic mulch. So.
Well, I was wondering too, like you said with the squirrels, will they go, like birds like that sound of the water?
Yeah.
So like here with Master Gardeners, I made like a little fountain out of concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Will the squirrels like that better too?
They'll love it too. I mean, that dripping sound will kind of get them to know where the water is, so it's a pretty good thing. Yes, Karen?
Yeah, how often do you add the mulch? I mean, once a year, twice a year?
I do it at least once a year. Usually fall is when I'll do mine, just because it's starting to get cooler and I don't mind. Because, I've got large, like I said, I've got huge sections that are gardens. if I'm moving that much mulch, I don't want it to be, hot. But, if you want to do it a couple times a year, that's fine. Just want to try and keep that couple of inches of thick mulch. One other thing that's nice about the mulch, if you do a real big, thick layer, weeding becomes almost non-existent for you. Yes? Yeah. And those weeds that do pop up are very easy to pull out, usually. Okay.
So we talked about the fact that probably the thing in your garden or your yard is going to take up the most water is your lawn. So we're going to talk a little bit about some options and how you go about reducing lawn a little bit. So reasons for reducing junk grass, it's going to save you time. I can do my backyard, I can mow it about 15 minutes. I have a corner lot, so I have a decent size area to cover. Front yard takes me a little bit longer because that includes the side. Used to be I didn't worry about how long it took me because I had 3 sons living at home. One of them didn't get it done. When they started moving out of the house, it suddenly dawned on me that I was probably going to have to take up the slack. So that's one of the reasons I started reducing some lawn. It's going to save money because that means less gas, less edging, less everything. It's better for your birds and your pollinators. That's another thing. I wanted to put in more beds so that I could put in butterfly plants and pollinator plants and things along those lines, and so it meant reducing lawn. And it saves our most valuable resource, which is the water. So landscape irrigation, this is actually the same statistic I gave you in the other, just a slightly different slide, because I don't normally do these two things together. But we already talked about $9 billion a day in irrigation, third of what we're using. So lawns originated with European nobility. Actually, they cleared trees around castles so they could see the bad guys coming. But then when they started turning those castles into manor houses, they had these big expanses of lawn, and rich people had servants and sheep that could keep that grass mowed. Okay? So then, American millionaires started doing the grand tour of Europe in the 1800s, all those robber barons, and they said, ooh, they have big lawns, we should have big lawns too. And so we get, built more and things along those lines. And again, they could afford servants and livestock to keep that grass under control. Right? Now, residential lawns really took off after World War II with the housing boom and the baby boomers and all that kind of stuff. And there was a real push to have lawns. In the beginning, grasses like Bermuda and St. Augustine were actually brought in for golf courses. A lot of the types of plants that they use in Europe can't handle the cold in the United States. So a lot of their grasses didn't really work for us. So Bermuda and St. Augustine are actually from Africa and Central Asia. Eventually, early lawns included clover as well as grass. And then they introduced broadleaf weed killers, and suddenly clover became a weed. Okay? Now, you know the upside of having clover in your lawn? It fixes nitrogen. You don't need fertilizer. But if you take the clover out, then the grass uses up the nitrogen, and you do need fertilizer. Okay. All right, so if you're not going to do lawn, what are some of your options? So that's one of the things we're going to look at here just a little bit. Again, not your only option. Desert is not the only thing out there. If you like it, that's fine. But the first thing we're going to look at is talk a little bit about hardscaping. Okay? Here we have some nice brick. Brick can be a little expensive unless you can find some used brick. I edge all my flower beds in brick, and I found that sometimes I can go to the brickyard and they'll have a partial pallet of brick that I can use, and I don't have to spend a whole lot of money on it. They ordered a bunch for somebody to build a house, and then they didn't end up using all of it. It's left over. I've also cleaned a lot of brick in my lifetime. My daddy taught me how to do that because we had a brick patio when I was growing up, and it was all secondhand brick. And he taught me how to take bricks and clear off the excess on it and get them all tidy and neat. So I've done a lot of that over the years. But most of our houses, when they're first built, there's not a lot of hardscaping. There's a sidewalk in the front probably, driveway, and there might be a little patio in the back. But there's definitely, most people have some room to expand that just a little bit and give you more surface area where you can entertain, you can have seating areas, things along those lines. I have a seating area in the front as well as the backyard. When I first started gardening, we had big dogs. And I started gardening in the backyard, and it lasted about 2 weeks. And they had either trampled or eaten everything I planted. So I started gardening in the front yard because I didn't have to worry about the dogs. Also didn't have to worry about the kids quite as much. They were usually in the backyard on the trampoline. So, you know, some of the things that we're talking about you can do in the front as well as the back. I love this picture. This is southwestern without being too deserty to me. And you've got flagstone and gravel. One of the least expensive things you can work with is pea gravel. And I like it pretty well as long as it's not too deep. It works pretty well for pathways. My little seating area in the front yard has gravel. I started out with DG, which is decomposed granite. It's granite gravel or granite crushed granite. And I found the weeds were a little, they really liked the DG. It also tracks into the house. With 3 boys, I had lots of it tracked into the house. Pea gravel, you'll still get some weeds in there, but you push that gravel back, and then there's a pretty good chunk of root showing, and I can pull it up from there. So it's a good thing to use. Here's another one. This is very much more modern. You've got those nice big concrete pavers, but notice they put gravel in between them. That actually means you don't have to use quite as many of the pavers. The gravel's cheaper. Here we got DG, and it's very popular these days. You'll see it used in Austin a lot. I mentioned I was working at the Wasp Museum in Sweetwater. We use it a lot out there for some areas. It will grow weeds, but they have one of those loophole hose. Have you ever seen it? It's kind of shaped like this, and our maintenance gal, she gets out there with that thing, and it does pretty good for getting the weeds out. It pulls them up root and all. I also wanted to point out, notice what they've got over here. We've got bigger rock. And they've got pockets where they're growing things. Some of these things will probably recede in the cracks and crevices, and eventually it'll soften it up even more. And this is another one I just like the picture. I love Mediterranean style gardens. And they work pretty well for our area, so things like lavender and rosemary work really well here. I don't know what kind of tree that is, but you can put a daffodil in there and get pretty much the same kind of look. Notice they don't have a lot of planting, but they've got lots of big pots and things along those lines, so that's another way that you can go. No grass. Mulch. We mentioned mulch before as a way to keep moisture into your flower beds, as a way to cut down on the weeds. And this is a very typical type mulch there. But also remember, mulch can be used for pathways. Put it between the rows in your vegetable garden to help keep the weeds down there. You can walk along it. This obviously is just regular, inexpensive mulch, probably like you get from the city. Again, very affordable way to cover some ground, okay? Lots of people go and get the bags because they're easy. If you don't have a pickup truck to go get mulch at the city, it's a little bit more difficult. But remember, almost every church in every neighborhood has a teenager with a pickup who's looking to make some money, okay? And you can usually find a teenager who, for a little bit of cash or a home-cooked meal, I taught high school and found out real quick, a lot of kids will work for a home-cooked meal. They will come and do some yard work for you, and move some stuff for you. Here again, they've got raised beds here. That's the veggies growing, and then they have mulch all around it. That 4 inches of mulch, just think about how little weeding you're going to have to do around that. So ground covers, okay? Ground covers is something I'm kind of getting interested in for several different reasons. One, I've got some areas where nothing really grows very well. I've got a fruitless mulberry. How many know what a fruitless mulberry is? It's the world's biggest weed. Okay? It is a tree that was very popular in the 60s and 70s because it grows fast and it gives you really good, dense shade. It's also susceptible to a lot of diseases and likes to die out in the middle, and it doesn't even make good firewood. But it does provide me shade on the west side of my house. So until it finally completely dies out and I have to take it out completely, I'm going to keep it. But it's hard to find things that grow underneath it. Grass sure isn't going to. So you have to opt for ground covers. And that's a good place. Also, they're using lots of ground covers as what they call a green mulch. Plant it under your bigger plants, and it'll help shade the ground, and it'll provide a place for beneficial insects, for your little lizards, and you know, all sorts of little critters in there. Bugs, which will bring in your birds, and it'll help to keep the ground cool, help to compete with the weeds and things along those lines. So we've got several different things here. Monograss, I think it's Larope is either the same thing by a different name or in the same category, family, or whatever, I believe. It comes in lots of different sizes. It can be mowed. The best way to clean it up in the fall is with leaf blower. Just blow the leaves off the top of it, but it'll stay pretty green. Creeping thyme is another one. It can handle full sun. Mondo tends to want some shade, at least in our area. Creeping thyme's going to be full sun. This is a Broadmoor juniper. There's several different of those creeping kind of carpet junipers. Again, full sun, drought tolerant. They do a really good job of, you know, if you've got some area maybe out towards the edge of your yard where it doesn't get a lot of water, but you want to fill it in, you want to keep it low so, you know, it's close to the curb and people don't have to worry about looking past it when they're going down the road. Something like this works really well. Purple Heart, it's another one that's probably going to need a little bit of shade. It can take some sun, but my experience is it needs a little bit of shade. Of course, I always say everything, including plants, needs some shade in Texas in the summertime. Sedges are becoming really popular. These are popping up in the gardening magazines a lot as an alternative for lawns, but also as a general ground cover. This one I know is a sedge called Pennsylvania sedge. There's also a Texas sedge, and that's S-E-D-G-E. It's also called Carex. I think that's the Latin family name for it. It's in the same family as nutgrass, and you know how hardy nutgrass is. Okay? Notice I said hardy, because it grows everywhere and you can't get rid of it. But they're using this a lot in the Austin area, and I'm assuming that maybe the Pennsylvania might be, I haven't looked it up to see how drought tolerant it is, but I would assume the Texas sedge is probably pretty drought tolerant. This is one of my favorite ground covers. It's called frog fruit or turkey tangle. I don't know where they come up with these names. And I don't know the Latin because I don't speak Latin. Sometimes I'll remember them, but this is one of my favorite ground covers. And there's several reasons for it. One, it's a Texas native, which means it's probably not going to have a lot of issues with insects and things along those lines. And it's, you know, pretty drought hardy. Tolerant, sorry. It'll grow in sun or shade. I have seen this growing in the middle of our local soccer field. My grandson used to play. Matter of fact, some of what I got, I actually pulled up some little sprigs and took them in my yard and stuck them in the ground and kept it watered. And guess what? It took off. It'll grow in the shade. That's what I've got under my fruitless mulberry. And it does really, really well. Now, it does die back in the wintertime, but it'll come back pretty quick. I have a gnat up here that's driving me crazy. So, yeah. So, I'm not going nuts. I'm just waving that way. Okay. It has a long bloom period. If we get some decent rain in the spring, it'll start blooming in April and it'll go all the way to the first freeze. So it's going to give you some flowers. Now notice that they're really small, and I gave you some bigger pictures so you can kind of see what they look like. It's a pollinator plant. Little bees, particularly native bees, like it a lot. Small butterflies like it. You'll also see some of the little wasps and things, beneficial wasps like it. And it's a host plant for the Phaon crescent, which is the little one on the left, and the buckeye butterflies, which is on the right. It's a little bit bigger. It's also a host plant for a couple of others, but they're not native to our area. They're further south in Texas. But it makes a really good ground cover. You can't always find it very easily, but we usually try to carry it in the Master Gardener plant sale. If you find someone who's got some, it does not take a lot. It sprigs very easily and sends out little runners. So if you can find someone who's got some, get a few sprigs and you can get it started. It takes a little while to cover. I'd say probably the area I've got, it's taken a couple of 3 years to fill in really well. It's loose enough that if I have plants though, they can come up through it, like wildflowers and things along those lines. I don't have to worry about choking stuff out. I haven't had that problem at least so far. Not very tall. Now, if it's in sun, it may try to reach up a little bit, but yeah, I'd say probably like that. Pretty small.
Does it take over easily?
In the areas that I've got it, it's doing really well. I've got it under a crepe myrtle and I've got it under my fruitless mulberry. I'm going to actually try it in some full sun areas where I have some other plants. Right now, what I've got underneath the fruitless mulberry, I've got some Mexican feathergrass, and they seem to be doing well together. They're playing nicely. So I'm kind of interested to see how it does with some of my other plants and if it's going to get a little bit too aggressive. But so far, it's behaved itself pretty well. I've been pretty happy with it.
Is it a climbing vine?
It won't climb. No, it stays pretty low. It doesn't seem to go up, try to cover up any other plants or anything like that.
So the runners that you said, do they create little roots?
Yeah, every little node, they're going to send out some roots. So it's, like I said, it's pretty easy to sprig, get a little sprig of it and stick it in some. I started mine in a pot just because I knew I would water it regularly. And then once it got pretty good size, I put it in the ground, and I don't water it very often. Periodically, but not very often. So some general ground cover suggestions. So for sun, trailing lantana is a great one. It comes in purple and white. I think there's now even a yellow one out there. Lantanas, of course, very drought tolerant, do really well. There's a lot of the low-growing sedums like Angelina and Lime Zinger. I find that Angelina will stay green in the wintertime. It kind of turns a coppery red. Now, if we get a really hard freeze, it'll freeze back to the ground. But it'll handle light freezes. And I should have gotten a picture of Angelina, but it puts out a little branch like this and has little leaves that kind of look like pine needles. I mean, they're very narrow, and it's a bright chartreuse green. And I have a big pot, and I grow it in that. And if I have something that I need, a pot that I'm doing, I need a filler, I'll take some of it out and stick it in there, and it'll grow. My grandson, the little one, baby Godzilla, he was pinching it off and throwing it into some other flower pots, and it rooted everywhere he threw it. So his mom was like, "Don't do that." I was like, "No, it's okay. It's okay. He won't hurt it." And sure enough. Catmint's another good one. Creeping germander is another one that's good. Catmint has a purple flower. Germander has kind of a white with a little tinge of lavender or pink to it. And ornamental grasses of different kinds. Prairie drop seed, I don't know how aggressive it is. Most of the places where I've seen it used, it was pretty much exclusive to the area. Mexican feathergrass, it'll get up fairly tall, taller than I consider it a ground cover, but some people consider things with ground cover, it's pretty tall. And it's pretty aggressive as far as reseeding, but it's really easy to pull up if it does. And I transplant it into the places or give it away or whatever, or chuck it in the compost bin. For shade areas, we mentioned Oropi, Creeping Jenny. Now I've had different reports on how much water this needs. I had someone say that I was looking it up trying to figure out exactly and said it needs lots of water. I had someone else say no, once it's established it's drought tolerant. I use it in pots as kind of a spiller over the sides in shady pots. But I've seen pictures of it as a ground cover. It looks like it does pretty well. Lamium is I've never used it, but I see it in a lot of magazines, and I keep saying I'm going to buy some and put it in the yard because it's so pretty. I think it's called false dead nettle or something like that. But it has a little purple or a pink flower. It's about that big, and it stays low to the ground. And there's one that has variegated leaves that are kind of pretty. Pigeonberry is another Kind of like frog fruit. It's a Texas native. It's wild and it's kind of loose, but it'll have little berries on it that birds like. And then silver ponyfoot, which is also known as dichondra. And I'll show you a picture of that here in just a little bit. The native dichondra is green. The silver ponyfoot is one that's has been hybridized. Yes, ma'am?
So if you plant catnip, is that gonna be eaten by your cats or?
Well, catmint and catnip are a little bit different.
Okay.
Now, I did have a cat who liked the catmint, and he would rub up against it all the time. But he just seemed to like it. He didn't roll in it, he just rubbed up against it.
My neighbor's cats used it for a bed,
Yeah,
but they didn't tear it.
didn't tear it up. My cats do the same thing to my Mexican feathergrass. They tend to lay it, and it does break down when they lay and roll around in it. So, yeah. Cats can be a challenge sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing you can do, and this is what I do, is replace my lawn with garden beds. And so I wanted to show you some examples and kind of talk about the kind of plants that are used. This is a house in Grand Prairie that has done what they call a pocket prairie in their front yard. It is all prairie plants. It's got a lot of native grasses. It's got a lot of native plants. Some of it to me is a little messier than I particularly like. And if you've ever seen my yard, I'm pretty messy when it comes to the plants. They're kind of all over the place. But I like this picture. This is kind of side part of the yard where they've done it a little more, I don't want to say formal, that's not the right word, but there's not quite as many grasses and it looks a little more intentional. Not quite so wild. So in this, we have some penstemon. Penstemons come in a lot of different sizes. I'm pretty sure that's a penstemon back there, but I could be wrong. There's some smaller, I think maybe right in there and down here. I bought some rock penstemon that's doing well for me. Some of the penstemons haven't done well for me, but the rock penstemon has done well, and it stays pretty small. Greg's mistflower, it's not blooming in this picture, but it's here. I recognize the leaves. That's something else that can be used for ground cover. Now, Greg's mistflower is hardy, okay? You know, other places they call it invasive. In this part of Texas, we call it hardy. It will take over an area, but the butterflies love it, so I just let it take over. And it's fairly drought tolerant. Salvia greyi, I love salvias in general, and all this pink in here, the dark pink is Salvia greyi, and they do really well here. Coreopsis, there's some in the background. Coreopsis has been hybridized pretty extensively. There's two different kinds. There's the lance leaf, which has a wider leaf, and then there's thread leaf, which has little teeny tiny kind of ferny looking leaves. I like the lance leaf Coreopsis. I think it does better. Some of the hybridized Coreopsis can be a little finicky at times. So I stick with the good old-fashioned yellow Coreopsis. It does really well for me. And then there's some blue bonnets. I don't know if y'all can see them back here with the prickly pear. So those are all good plants to use in your garden. And you don't have to have a prairie garden to use those. I have everything but blue bonnets. Now I do have a few blue bonnets in my wildflower garden, but they didn't do great. They didn't come back this year. Hopefully next year. Stupid insects. Okay, so this is an English cottage garden, okay? And most of the plants here are probably not things that you're going to want to grow in our part of the country, but you can get the same look using some slightly different plants. So if you look at this, you got a lot of delphiniums, and there's foxglove, roses, and you've got some poppies, and then some other things I don't even know what all they are. But you can use antique roses rather than your hybridized roses. Antique roses are roses that are old roses that have been around for hundreds of years. We also have things called found roses. These are roses that were found growing wild at old homesteads or in old cemeteries, and horticulturists have gone out and taken cuttings from them and are now growing them. And you can get them in places like Antique Rose Emporium in Brenham. They have a wonderful catalog. Even if you don't want to buy from them, you can look at their catalog and get an idea of what are some of the roses that are really hardy and do well in this part of the country. And they'll tell you give you all sorts of information about them, the climbers or whatever. But antique roses are a good way to go. So liatris is a native wildflower here. It's also known as gay feather. You'll see it between here and San Angelo in the fall. It's a big nectar plant for butterflies, particularly monarchs that are moving. In the summertime, it has kind of ferny leaves that are kind of soft and narrow, and they'll start sending up spikes, and they'll have purple flowers all up and down it. One of the things that we kind of associate with cottage gardens or English gardens is those spiky flowers. You can also use poppies. Poppies grow pretty well here. I do corn poppies and California poppies both. Now my corn poppies didn't come back this year. I don't know if it was because we just didn't get enough rain in the winter. I'll just replant. Package of seeds is $1.50. Yes?
Where do you plant those poppy seeds?
I plant them in the fall. My mom always said plant them on the snow. And I said, okay. She said, no, that's what I've always been told, plant them on the snow. But I just plant them in the fall, and they seem to do pretty well. I think they need to be planted, here they definitely need to be planted in the fall so they can have some time for the seeds to expand and contract and break that seed coat on them. A lot of wildflowers need to be planted in the fall, and then they'll bloom in the spring.
Do you just put them on top of the soil?
Yeah, most of the wildflowers, I'll just sprinkle them out there and then kind of mush them down a little bit. Most of them need some sunlight to germinate. So, and that may be another problem with my poppies. The bed I had them in, I didn't break out a lot of the leaves, and they might not have had enough sunlight to germinate. So that may be part of my problem. Mealy cup sage, there's a lot of different versions of mealy cup, but it's a little bit different than salvia greca, same family. But again, it's going to give you a tall spike of flowers. There's Henry Dillberg, which is purpley blue, Augusta Dillberg, which is white, Queen Victoria or Victoria is another blue one. It stays a little bit lower. Dillberg and both Henry and Augusta get pretty tall. But again, it gives you those spiky flowers, and they're very drought tolerant. Russian sage is another one. It's not native, but it's something I really like. It's a great pollinator plant, really drought tolerant, can handle the heat, and it'll keep on blooming. And then phlox is another good one to use. And my phlox are doing really well this year. So.
Does phlox need a lot of water? I have a hard time growing that.
Right now, all my phlox are in pots. So they're getting daily water just in the pot. I'm planning on putting them out in the fall in the flower beds, so I'll have to see. Anybody else have?
I do.
Do they take a lot of water?
Yeah, especially this year. They don't do well in drought years.
Okay.
And they seem to die back, and you think, well, they're gone. And then come the fall, when it cools down, they pop back up.
They pop back up.
You can get spring and fall flowering off of both of them.
Cool.
I have John Dennett lawn.
Mm-hmm.
I have it mostly shade.
Yeah.
So it'll let me know when it needs water and start looking at it.
Yeah.
I just water it deep.
I've got prairie phlox that blooms in the spring, and it's in the ground, and it's looking a little peaky right now, but everything is.
Yeah, that's the prairie phlox that I've got.
Yeah, and then I've got one that's called Victoria, and it's in a big pot, and then I have another one in a big tub, and I don't even know what it is. It was some I probably picked up a plant set.
Victoria is a Texas superstar.
Yeah. And usually Texas Superstar plants, which is a designation from Texas A&M, are usually plants that do well. They don't take a lot of extra attention and are usually fairly drought tolerant, at least once they're established. Okay, so this is a house. I think this is in Texas. I don't know that for sure, but a lot of things I see are things that you would see in Texas. So you've got yarrow, which is down here and over in here. Now yarrow's another one that looks good in the spring, looks good in the fall, ratty in the heat of summer. I just cut it back, and sure enough in the fall it'll come back and look great. Henry Dillberg salvia, I think that's what this is right here. That would be my guess, or something along those lines. It's definitely a salvia. Silver ponyfoot, I mentioned before, that's this little ground cover here. Now, I found that my silver ponyfoot likes some shade. It does not like full sun. They grow it a lot in Austin. And like I said, it's called dichondra is its Latin name. There's a green version, sometimes called wild ginger. Has a little leaf that looks kind of like a violet. They do well in low-growing areas. My son has it coming up in his yard on one side of the house where it's kind of narrow and it doesn't get a lot of sun, and it sometimes gets wet in there because it's a low spot. And he's got it growing all over the place. He says, "What is it?" Someone told me it's a weed, and I said, "No, it's ground cover." A weed is just a plant that's in the wrong spot. This is in the perfect spot for where this needs to be. I said, just leave it alone, mow it, it'll be fine. And sure enough, it's filled in, it looks nice.
Dusty Miller?
I'm sorry?
Is it similar to the Dusty Miller?
The color of the leaf is, and the kind of fuzziness of the leaf is, but other than that, it stays low where the Dusty Miller tends to get upright. Now the
flower like Dusty Miller?
I've never seen a flower. I'm sure it does, but it's probably so inconspicuous I've not noticed it. What color?
Yellow.
Yellow? Now the dichondra I have that's coming up in my yard, the green, doesn't seem very fuzzy to me, but I haven't paid much attention to it. It's happy and I'm happy, and so I just leave it alone. Penstemons, again, I mentioned penstemons, and I'm pretty sure that's what this is right in here. And again, that rock penstemon does pretty well for us here. And then there's no daylilies in here, but I kept looking at this orange plant right here, which looks like a small shrub. And I kept thinking, you know, daylilies would work really well in there. They're drought tolerant. They grow well here. And so it would work pretty well in this landscape, I think. This I know is in Texas. This is in Austin. This house was actually on one of those shows where they go in and they renovate the house on Home and Garden. I don't remember who renovated it or when I saw it, but I recognized the house immediately. But it's got a great landscape. Notice not much grass at all, but I love the rocks. I like rocks. And so they've got some really nice ones in there and planted around them. So we've got a little redbud tree over here, Texas native. If you get either the Texas or the Mexican redbuds, do best here. I think it's called forest pansy, is a hybrid and doesn't do well. Can't really handle our heat very well. There's also an Oklahoma one I think will probably do fairly well here. The redbud's a great little tree. Texas mountain laurel, which is right over here. Another great Texas native, very drought tolerant. It is slow growing. If you decide you want a Texas mountain laurel, save up, get the one that's a little bit bigger. I have one that's just now reaching the bottom of the roof of my house, and I've probably had it 10 years. So it started out about like this, and it's probably, not even as tall as that prior thing up there. It's very slow growing. It has beautiful purple flowers on it, look a lot like wisteria. And it's evergreen, so it'll stay green in the wintertime. Irises, bearded iris do well, and they're fairly drought tolerant. And then creeping juniper, I mentioned that, the broadboard juniper on the other one. This is a different cultivar, but it's the same kind of thing, and it does well. This is in California. I can just look at it. It says California. But one, yes, I'm sorry.
How often do you have to separate your irises?
If they're not blooming as much, it's probably time to separate them. Mine have been doing pretty well, though the patch is getting pretty big. So I'm thinking pretty soon I'm going to need, it's been a while, probably 4 or 5 years since I divided mine out. So it's probably going to be, probably next spring. I keep thinking this spring I won't see as many irises and I'll know it's time. But I've had 2 really good years of irises. So
So do you divide them in the fall or in the spring?
I do them in the fall, but really irises are pretty tough. You can do them just about any time. And the thing with irises, if you do them in the spring, and I know y'all would never do this, but I sometimes do this, I divide up the irises or whatever it is I'm dividing up, and then I piddle around and it's too hot to actually plant them. If you put iris in a plastic bag, put a little water in there, set it in the shady spot, they'll be fine to fall. The leaves will die back, but the tubers are just fine. They're hardy. I had some on the front porch that my mom had brought me from her yard, and I just didn't have time, and I kind of threw them on the front porch and forgot about them, and then I realized, oh my heavens, she's going to come looking, where did you put the iris in? And so 3 months later, I totally forgot. I had not put water in anything. 3 months later, I saw them and said, oh, I better put them in the ground. Guess what? They came up. So.
You know those little snow saucers
Yeah.
that you have? Well, I found one at the garage sale. It's good for hauling stuff around the
Oh,
yard.
yeah.
And somebody came over and said, here, Karen, I know you like irises, and dumped a whole bag 3 years ago, and they're all still there.
Yeah.
I just keep throwing water on them, and I get blooms every now and again.
Yeah.
One of these days, I got to get them in the ground.
I have some that I had decided, I had given away all I could, and I threw them in the alley, and guess what? They're growing in the alley. So they're tough. But look at, I know this is California because this is a blue fescue, a little blue bunch grass, and in our part of the country, it cannot handle the sun. It would have been fried in 2 days. So I know this has to be probably Northern California, Central California, where it's a little bit cooler. But there are a lot of different kinds of grasses that you can use. This is kind of a modern look to it. You've got lots of very clean lines. We've got some yucca and the ornamental grasses. Oh, it's agave, sorry. And then this is not a Texas sage. This is probably an olive. But we can't grow them here because they're not hardy enough for our cold. But if you put a Texas sage in with this, it would look really, really nice. There's a lot of, I mentioned native grasses before, Mexican feathergrass, prairie drop seed, those are low. If you want something taller, you can go with little blue stem. If you want something a little bit taller, you can go with big blue stem. Muley grass, there's a white muley and a pink muley, both of them do well. Pink muley does take a little bit more water to establish, but once it gets established, it does pretty well. So you can do a lot with grasses. And they're pretty low maintenance. They usually need to be trimmed back once a year, and they're pretty good.
What about lemongrass?
Lemongrass is a little bit different. It's not a true grass, but I understand it does pretty well here. Anybody here have lemongrass?
I did, it acted like an annual at my house.
At your house? Okay.
Same thing here.
Same thing. So I guess it's not in our zone, but a lot of people love it. I just haven't happened to grow it, but there's a lot of things I haven't grown that I'd like to. I just don't have enough space. This is, again, I'm assuming it's California because it says California in the sign. Also, it's California poppies. And California poppies do well here. Now, I've never had them get like that, but they stay low and they're a nice little filler and they don't seem to take a lot of water. Artemisia, I'm pretty sure that's what this is here. And there's several different types of Artemisia, but it gives you that nice blue-green fuzzy, and it's pretty deserty. Santolina is another one that's a lot like Artemisia. It's also called lavender cotton, which I don't know why, because it's not lavender and it doesn't look like cotton. But there's a silver version and then there's a green. The green one's back here. It can get a little woody after a while. I like it because it's evergreen. And then if it gets kind of big and woody and it's not looking great, then pull it out and replace it. They'll go for about 5-6 years and look pretty good. And then after a while, they do start getting to where they're not looking great. But to me, it's worth it because you get that pretty green in the wintertime. I have a hard time finding things that are evergreen to use in the yard, at least in our part of Texas. And then again, they have some native grasses. I'm pretty sure, don't know for sure, but pretty sure that's some prairie drop seed in there that's kind of coming up amongst the poppies.
Can you point that out again?
Yeah, this right in here, I'm pretty sure that's prairie drop seed.
Are you saying drop seed?
Drop seed, yeah.
Okay.
And you can look it up and kind of get an idea of what it looks like. So native turf grasses is another way to go. If you really just have to have some turf, you can always go with the buffalo grasses, and that's what's growing here. There's a couple of hybrid versions, and I say hybrid, it's actually blends. Native American Seed grows a blend called Thunder Turf, and it's a combination of buffalo grass, blue grama, and curly mesquite. All of these are bunch grasses. So the downside of a bunch grass is you've got little bunches and there's space in between. So the idea is to do blends of those bunch grasses that give you more coverage. What they have found that once this is established, it actually does a better job of blocking out weeds than Bermuda. Now it will go dormant if it doesn't get rain, but it survives that dormancy. So in the heat of summer it may get brown if you're not watering it, but as soon as we get some rain it'll come back, boom, it's going to be green again. Yes, ma'am?
Doesn't it take a long time to establish?
I don't know how long it takes to establish. I haven't looked into that.
Well, I heard there's the plain buffalo grass. Takes
Yeah.
a long time.
And it may be that these others, the grama and the curly mesquite, may actually help fill in until it gets well established. The thing about it is you're going to have to make sure your Bermuda's all gone, because if you have Bermuda left in the lawn, it's gonna choke it out before it gets established. It is drought tolerant. You don't need to mow it. You can mow it, but you have to leave it longer than Bermuda. It'll get up to about 8 inches, and I think you can cut it to 4 or 5. But you do have to leave it a little bit longer than Bermuda is. But it's pretty. Lady Bird Johnson Center has the same blend. They just call it a different name. It's called Habiturf. And they used it at the George Bush Center in Dallas. They've got about 8 acres of it in their wildflower areas. So that might be a good place to check it out and see what it looks like. I tried to find some pictures of it online, but they kept showing pictures of the buildings and some of the art installations and things like that. And so, I mean, there were some pictures kind of at a distance, but I couldn't really tell a whole lot about the turf. So how do you get started? Okay, let's say you've got your yard and you're wanting to reduce some of your lawn. Now, I don't know about you, but when I started trying to reduce lawn, my husband wasn't really keen on the idea. Even though it was going to mean less mowing, he just wasn't used to seeing a yard that looked differently. Don't we need a place for the kids to play? Don't we need a place for the dogs? Yeah, I'm not getting rid of all of it. We're just going to reduce it. So I found that the best way to do it was a little bit at a time and kind of getting used to the idea. Now he's all for it. Okay? But one of the things that you can do is you can just put in a little seating area. Okay? They're probably using mulch here. Now, if you're wanting to get rid of the Bermuda grass in there, okay, again, you're probably going to have to do some digging on it. But if you're just trying to have mulch in an area, you can put something down that's pretty heavy, cardboard, and see how it does. I'd go in first and pull out as much as I could, but if you're having to grow it, if you're having to take it out of the mulch, it's a little bit different than if you're putting a flower bed in. Does that make sense? Because I can go into a mulch area or gravel area and hit it with the Roundup real quick, you know, and not have to worry about it blowing into something else because it's in a rocky or mulchy area. Add some island beds. This is what I did. Grass isn't growing under those trees anyway. If it is, it's not growing very well. So I started out with, you know, a little island, and then I made the island a little bit bigger, and then a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and that kind of goes around the perimeter of my yard. You can expand existing beds. Most flower beds that are put in by contractors are not very big, and there's always room to put in some more space in that flower bed. So you don't have to get rid of all your lawn. Can you see the lawn?
Yeah.
It's right there. See? There's some lawn. Okay, mine's not that bad. I have a little bit more lawn than that. But it can be part of what you're doing. All right. So how do you get rid of your lawn? All right. St. Augustine is going to be easier to get rid of than Bermuda. Everything's easier to get rid of than Bermuda. Okay? What's the worst weed I have in my yard? Bermuda. Because when it's in my flower bed, it's a weed.
Yeah.
Okay? That's just all there is to it. So you can run a sod cutter or use a spade to remove the sod. Okay? Now, with Bermuda, a sod cutter is not going to get all the roots. Alright? But it's a good start. Okay? Take in the sod cutter and then maybe go in with some Roundup. You can use glyphosate, that's Roundup. You're gonna have to use it more than once, probably 3 or 4 times. My recommendation is come in with a sod cutter or till it, spray it with Roundup, and wait a week. See what comes up.
Water it in between to get the Bermuda to think it's going to grow.
Think that it's going to grow and think that we're done, and then it'll come up, and then spray again. My main recommendation though is be very careful with this chemical. Now some of you may be cool with it. I'm not. I used to use it pretty regularly, but the more studies I've looked at, the more nervous I am about using it, especially on lawns where my grandkids are going to play. So I use it very judiciously. All right? I put it in one spot, and if I think it's going to go somewhere else, I'll actually paint it on the plant with a brush. Especially if it's coming up amongst other things that I don't want to hurt. Yes, ma'am.
I've found that a lot of times when they do those studies, they use a lot more than anybody would use.
Yeah, a lot more than we would use, probably.
Well, I think that's probably where some of the problem comes in. You know?
Probably.
Because it tells you on the label what it makes it, and they say, oh, well, if I use twice as much, then it'll be more effective.
Yeah, that's my dad. That was the way my dad was. Which was, if this much will work, then this much is even better. And a lot of the studies are in areas where they're using it commercially, and they are using it in larger quantities. Yes, ma'am?
How do you know what grass you have?
I'm
new to the area, so I don't know what I have.
Yeah. I would Google Bermuda and look and compare it. It's going to be usually, well, it's not right now. Normally it's going to be a fairly dark green, and it's going to have a finer blade than St. Augustine, which is a little bit.
That's not what I have.
Okay.
This is like constant, goes out like this, and it's very tough.
Yeah, that could be Bermuda. Now, I have a lot of just field grasses growing in my yard because I live on a corner and things blow in and wash in a lot. So I have a lot of things in my lawn that are not, well, most people would have in their lawn, but I'm lazy. I'd rather work in my flower beds than on my lawn. So, but yeah, I would Google it and see if you can figure out what it is. There's also some different apps that sometimes will identify plants for you. Now, they're, about 70% of the time they're right. I usually take 2 or 3 pictures of what I'm looking at. If it tells me the same thing all 3 times, then it's probably good. If it tells me 3 different things, then it doesn't know what it is and it's just guessing. So. Now, smother it with wet cardboard and newspaper. Now, my recommendation if it's Bermuda is to do a combination of the last 3 bullet points. Try it all. It's hard to get out. Now, I have some flower beds where I came in and I cut it down really good, and I dug out some of the Bermuda grass, and I used the wet cardboard, and yeah, it came back up. But it came back up in spots, and I've gone in with a hoe, and I've hoed out those little spots. So the wet cardboard, wet newspaper are not going to be perfect, but it could be a start. All right. Again, check with some folks at your church or kids in the neighborhood, see who's looking to make some money, and see if they'll come out and help you do some stuff. That's another way, to find some labor. But it's hard getting rid of Bermuda grass. I still work on getting rid of the Bermuda grass. It's something that I probably will do, the rest of my life, but I like my plants, and so that's what I'm doing. So here's 2 of my best helpers. This is Josh, my youngest. He's a little older than that now. He was out there tamping down. This is my front yard. When I moved, I took half of my lawn out on half of my front yard. There's a little bit of strip that goes around the edge where people walk, because I have not found a ground cover that can handle foot traffic as well as grass can. But we took it out. Part of the reason was I wanted more flower beds. Part of the reason was I had a bad case of khaki weed, which is a little weed that has these little tiny burrs on it. They stick to everything, and then you step on it in the middle of the night and you use bad words. So we tried everything to get rid of that stuff, and finally I said, I'm just covered, I'm just getting rid of it. And it'll occasionally come up through the gravel. But again, now I can get it because it's in one little location. I can pull out the sprigs. So Josh is tamping down. We started out with the DG, the granite. And Gavin's supervising. Gavin is now almost 9. Now this is what it looked like probably about 2 years after the first picture. Now there's even more stuff and it's a little bit bigger. I picked this particular picture because you can't see into the weeds. I took it at just the right angle. You can't see the weeds or the grass coming up. It was perfect. But I'm constantly changing things around and working on it. But I have chairs out there now. This is where I put pots of succulents because it's under that pecan tree. They get a little bit of shade during the heat of the day. And we really enjoy it. It's in the front yard. But it's funny, if you're sitting in the front yard, people walking down the street will talk to you. Not kids, but teenagers, they have their headphones on, they're going to ignore you. But people are taking their walks, their runs, their ride their bicycle. They'll wave and holler, and sometimes people stop and talk to me about my yard, which I always love because there's nothing master gardeners love more than talking about their plants. That's why I'm up here. Okay, so some drought-tolerant plants that I would recommend. These are some small trees. When it comes to big trees, pecans, oaks are good, cedar elm, that kind of thing. I find people have a little more struggle with some of the smaller trees. So we've got desert willow. There's a hybrid called Bubba that gives you a little darker pink flower. I have Bubba in my backyard. This is Yopon holly. It's an evergreen. It's going to give you beautiful red berries. If you like mockingbirds, plant one. You'll have some mockingbirds. 2 years ago when we had the big freeze, we had a whole flock of cedar waxwings and robins came through. And they were on a neighbor's bush that had berries, and then they tried to get into my yard and get on the Yopon. But my 2 mockingbirds valiantly defended that bush. And none of those birds got any of the berries off of them. The mockingbird saved them all for themselves. They're a little protective of it. This is a vitex. It's not a Texas native, but it's a great little tree. I mentioned, I think, in the first program. If you've never seen it, they've got several planted along Arnold Boulevard, and we have one out here. And the roadside parks at Ranger Hill have them there as well. And when the highway department started using them for landscaping, I thought, okay, this is probably a good little tree to plant because they're not coming out and watering all the time. Redbud, as I mentioned before, forest pansy is not a very good one, but the Mexican, the Texas, and I'm pretty sure the Oklahoma one would do well here. Crepe myrtle, and we have lots of crepe myrtles in town. This one is my favorite, which is a white called Natchez. Almost all of those that are named after Indians are supposed to be particularly drought tolerant.
Don't cut them back.
And yes, no crepe murder.
Crepe murder.
Yes, no crepe murder. If you're going to prune them, you don't top them. It's bad for the plant. It looks horrible. It destroys the structure. It causes all sorts of problems. So don't do that. You can prune it. You prune it like you normally would. You wouldn't go into a pecan tree and just cut the top off of it. That's crazy. Why they do it with crepe myrtles, I don't know. I think it's because people end up with trees that are bigger than what they were hoping for, and so they're cutting it down to the size they want. Well, it doesn't work. If you want a little crepe myrtle, buy a little crepe myrtle.
Are they planted under the eaves of the roof?
Probably. And they come in every size from like this to, really tall. My Natchez is probably 30 feet tall. Maybe not quite that, maybe 25. But it's been there a while, and it's nice and big, and I get white flowers all summer, and it's very, very pretty.
I don't remember the variety, but at ACU when we did that walking tour, he said there's one that only goes to like 10 foot. And won't go
I have a pink one that only gets about like this. Yeah. I use it as a shrub more than I do a tree. I was hoping it'd be a tree, but I didn't look at the tag. Look at the tag. It tells you. Okay, some shrubs. Now I have a hard time. To me, a shrub is something that stays evergreen. I think the definition of shrub actually has to do with size, because they're oftentimes recommend things that I consider perennial, but they say that they're shrubs. So most of what we're looking at here is going to be evergreen. This is that Texas silver on sage. It is great. I mean, they grow them in Midland along the highway. You know they're not watering those things.
What do you call it again?
Texas sage. It's also called cenizo, Cenizo. Sometimes it's called Texas Ranger. It's called a lot of different things. Go ahead.
Cenizo is one of them.
Cenizo is one of them. There's a lot of hybrids out now. So there are some that have a more pink flower, one that has white flowers called Alba. They are usually 3x3 or 4x4. There are a few that'll get a little bit bigger, a few that'll get a little bit smaller. Again, read the tags. There's one called Green Cloud, which has a greener leaf. It still has kind of that grayish tint to it, but it's greener than the others, and the flower is a little deeper color. So there's several different ones out there, and we almost always have it at the plant sale. And it's one of the ones that sometimes you can get at the big box stores occasionally, and they're usually pretty well priced. If you get the original one, which is just the Cenizo, it will reseed. And I actually have one that's a really nice one that came up from seed. The others, they get mowed down because they're in grass. This is Agurita. Now, some people call Agurita a shrub, some people call Agurita a big weed. It kind of depends on how you look at it. If you like hollies, hollies around here don't always do real great because they need more shade than we're willing to give them. Agurita has a pointy leaf like a holly, and red berries like a holly, but it can handle sun. And you'll see it growing along the fence lines. It is a Texas native, and it's not going to need a lot of irrigation, but it can be a little unruly as far as kind of being sprawly. It's not as neat and tidy as hollies are, so you know it takes a little manicuring sometimes. This is Cotoneaster. It looks like cotton Easter when you look at the name, but it's actually pronounced Cotoneaster. It's not a Texas native, but it is a great little shrub. You can buy, there's some that are actually kind of hug the ground and make a good ground cover. Some get a little bit bigger, but it's not a big shrub. It has red berries. Lots of times it'll drop its leaves in the wintertime and the berries will stay, and it's a good draw for birds. But it's a nice little shrub. Probably the one thing I recommend the most, other than the Texas sage, is dwarf yaupon. Dwarf yaupon is a Texas native. It stays relatively small. Again, they'll say 3x3 on the tag. It's probably going to get 4x4. It's not going to put out berries like the regular yaupon tree does. It will have flowers in the spring, and the bees like it. It can be, cut up to look like a little ball. You can let it kind of do its own thing, but it usually gives just a nice, dense, pretty evergreen color in the wintertime, and they're very drought tolerant. They do really, really well.
Yeah.
Yes?
How about American Beautyberry?
American Beautyberry, see, it is a shrub, but it drops its leaves, so I sometimes forget about it, because I think of shrubs as being evergreen. American Beautyberry is another one. It takes some shade, and I have found that it takes a little bit of water if it's getting some more sun. I have one that's getting some afternoon sun because it's just where my neighbor's pecan tree is. Though it's shaded most of the day, it takes a little bit more water. One I have in the front yard under a yaupon is in pretty good shade. It gets a little bit of morning sun, and it doesn't take near as much water to keep it happy. It's going to have a pretty big green leaf on it like this, and it has little clusters of berries all up and down the stem. And the birds like those. And the berries, some people's house, the berries will stay through the winter. They never do at my house because the mockingbirds get them as soon as the berries pop up. But they are pretty for about 2 or 3 days until the mockingbirds have stripped them of all the berries. I also have a possum haw holly, which is another one of those that will drop its leaves and leave berries. It's actually native to a little further south. You'll see it a lot of times in the hill country along the fence lines. If you see a bush or small tree that's covered in red berries in the late winter, it doesn't have any leaves, that's a possum haw. My possum haw has gotten bigger than any possum haw I have ever seen. Apparently it likes being in my yard, and I give it water like I do everything else, and it's just as happy as it can be. It doesn't put out a lot of berries for me, and I think it's because it doesn't have anything to cross-pollinate here. I think the more we get in town, more likely we are to have better berry production. But it's actually, for me, it's a small tree. It's gotten pretty tall. I got it in the corner of the house, and it works really well. Yes, ma'am?
That Algerita, it seems to be more like a cactus.
It has some succulent properties to it, definitely.
Because, I mean, it has berries on it, you can knock them off, make jam with them.
Yeah.
It grows wild out at the Kirby.
It grows wild in a lot of places.
Everywhere,
Yeah. And it would be good if you're going with kind of that deserty Southwest kind of thing. It's been recommended to me because of the berries, because I like birds, and so it brings the birds in. So, but for some people, it's going to be a little too wild and stickery. Yeah, like I said, if you're not big on hollies with their pointy leaves, you're definitely not going to like that tree. And that's why I don't have it. I don't even have hollies in my yard because I don't want things poking me all the time. If I have to get in there and clear stuff out, I don't want my plants
You plant
hurting.
that under your daughter's window.
That's right. You have a daughter, you plant it under the window, that will work. Yeah.
Or your young teenage boy.
Yeah, to keep him in. Yeah, exactly. So some perennials real quick. These are probably my favorites. I mentioned, I think, almost all of them. Salvia greggii comes about in just about every color you can imagine. Some of the hybrids are not quite as heat and drought tolerant as the original, but I still find them to do pretty well in a regular lawn setting, flower garden setting. Excuse me. Russian sage. It's a nice one. It's not native, but it's a good pollinator plant. It takes all sorts of heat and just keeps on going. Lantana. Now there are a lot of different hybrid lantanas, and not all of them are cold hardy. The good old fashioned orange Texas native can pretty much take just about anything. I have the purple trailing. It made it through the big freeze really well. I had some new gold yellow, did not. But again, these are so affordable to me. I treat them as annuals lots of times, and if they live longer than that, yay. Because again, can take the heat, they don't take a lot of water, butterflies love them. They're just, to me, they're just a nice little plant. Some people like the way the leaves smell. I don't particularly, but that's the only downside as far as I can tell. Coneflowers. Now I find that coneflowers do better for me if they get a little bit of shade. They're a prairie plant, but I think they're a prairie plant from a little further north than us. They're considered a Texas native, but I don't know if the ones I've gotten are just a little less hardy. I know that some of the fancy new hybrids are a little more difficult to deal with. They're not quite as hardy as some of the others. But I have just the good old purple, and they get a little shade, they're really happy. And when I say a little shade, I mean a couple hours in the afternoon seems to be enough to keep them pretty content. And I've got them in lots of different places in the yard. This is some coreopsis. Now this is threadleaf coreopsis. You can see how the leaves are really thin. This is the native threadleaf, which means it hasn't been hybridized. And it does pretty well for us, and then the lance leaf does really, really well. And the lance leaf reseeds really well, and so do coneflowers. I get a lot of new coneflowers coming up, and I'm perfectly happy with that. This is Turk's Cap. It's one of the few perennials that does well in shade for us. It's a great hummingbird plant. They love it. They love it, and they love the salvias, and they love another plant called Flamacanthus, which is another one that's really drought tolerant. I shouldn't put up and ran out of room. Yes, ma'am.
If you decide to go the wildflower landscaping, is that, I know there's snakes everywhere, but is that more attractive to snakes?
I would say that it probably is, and I think it depends on where you're living. I live in town. I've had some grass snakes, but I've had grass snakes just in the yard. Where I'm located, we've not really had a snake issue. We're not that close to any creeks or anything like that. If I lived in the country, I would probably moderate either I would do a wildflower area and just not plan on walking through it a whole lot. Or I would plant wildflowers and put some space between them. So, people kind of say, oh, everybody's worried about snakes. Well, yes, in this part of Texas, snakes are an issue. To ignore it is just kind of ridiculous. But I think if you're living in town and you're not too close to a creek, I think the wildflower area will work. Now, I am careful when I get in there. We did have baby possums one year. They were actually under my husband's shop, but they loved to get in the wildflower bed because there were so many little bugs to eat. I actually had an area that had really grown up. For some reason, the flowers were really intense, and come to find out I had a feral cat living in there. I saw him one night go, sliding in there to hide. So I am careful when I get in there, and lots of times I'll get out there in the heat of the day when I know there's probably not going to be anything. Now I've got some rocks out there that I originally put out there just to look nice. I'm fixing to remove them, but I'll wait till winter to do it.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Well, they say that the snakes don't like gravel.
Yeah.
Because the scales on their belly are not as big,
Yeah.
they're not as strong as the scales on the top.
Yeah.
And so it could tear their scales, and so they don't like it.
My general rule of thumb when I'm gardening is watch where you step and always wear gloves.
Yeah.
Anytime I don't wear gloves, I will end up wishing I had. Don't pull up Johnson grass by hand without gloves on. It cut me, I bled all over the place, across all 4 fingers. So, you have to kind of live with nature and learn to be respectful and kind of watch it. Now, working out at the Wasp Museum, I watch for snakes out there because we've had them. We had them in one that got in the hanger the other day. Rattlesnake. Sweetwater is the rattlesnake capital of Texas. So if I go out there, I always have closed-toed shoes. Not that that's going to help a lot, but I do pay attention. I pay close attention when I'm out there.
Wear boots.
They don't issue you snake boots when you go out there?
No. But right now there's not a whole lot of landscaping out there because what I did plant burned up. So I'm going to wait till fall and we're going to plant some wildflower seeds, but we'll spread those seeds out a little bit. And we'll have places where there's wildflowers and we'll have places where there's other flowers. And we've actually discussed that a little bit because it is an issue. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about just general landscape and design and flower beds and trying to grow things next to the house.
Yeah.
Okay, I've had some people say it's good to keep the area next to the house moist, so foundation issues, you don't have the shrinking and swelling. And I thought, well, that sounds good for a flower bed. If I'm going to put water next to the house, I might as well grow something.
Yeah.
But then I've had some people say it's not good to grow right next to the house. You need to have, just some gravel or something under there to give you a buffer between the house and where you actually start growing something. Yeah. Does anybody have any experience with that?
My main thing is to make sure you consider the adult size of the plant so that you don't have it too close to the house. I've also found, for me personally, if I need to get out and paint, it helps to have some plants a little bit out from the house, so I don't have anything right up next to it. Now I have some mist flower that grows all the way up, but it's going to die back in the wintertime, and that's when I usually do my painting is, on those warm days in the winter if I can.
But as far as foundation issue or damage to the house or something?
The only thing I've had issues with is trees rubbing on the house if I get them too close, or shrubs. And we've had to prune back some things because I got them too close.
I think also that, like you were asking, you have to be conscious that if you have anything close to the house, that's a blind spot. And like I was working around my house and I have these big old 500-gallon that catches a water. And I have a drip spout where it goes into this other container for the overflow. And I was cleaning that container and I flipped it. And as soon as I flipped it, there was a snake right on the bottom. So you have to be conscious of anything that's close. You should clear all clutter.
And you don't want your mulch up on the side of the house. You want it, the concrete, the footing, it's fine to have it up there, but you don't want it to stack it up so close that it's going to be up on your siding and hold moisture and things along those lines. So.
I had someone tell me one time, if you're going to turn anything and you're in a snake area, turn it towards you.
Yeah, because it's between, they can go that way.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, back to this real quick. So some really good sources. I already mentioned Pam Pennick's books. This is Beautiful No More Lawns by Evelyn Hayden is a good one, and then Ground Covers is another good one. Let's see if I have any. Nope, that was it.
I didn't get that written down.
I'll scoot it back. I was just looking to see if I had another slide after that. Any other questions? Y'all had some good questions during.
So I.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm gonna have chickens, but I'm scared of snakes.
Uh-huh.
So planting arboretas around the area of the chicken coop, is that a good thing?
I don't think the arboretas will keep the snakes away.
Nothing will keep.
I don't think anything. I mean, I think if you've got some dense chicken wire around where you know, some heavy, that has a small mesh. Karen, you've got chickens, don't you?
Hardware cloth.
Hardware cloth.
That'll keep them out of the coop.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
The problem is that the chicken feed will draw the rats, and the rats will draw the snakes. That's your problem.
Metal trash cans.
Metal, yeah. Metal trash cans. I do that for bird seed, because I, you know, put out some bird seed. Yeah, they'll get in all sorts of stuff. I had a plastic bucket that I was using for my bird seed. The rats chewed through it.
Do mothballs work? Somebody told me mothballs.
No, it is illegal to use mothballs.
Oh, why?
It is, again, it is not an approved use of the mothballs. So technically it is an illegal use of a harmful chemical.
The only thing, we had armadillos under my mom's deck. And they told us to put some mothballs, just put them in like a sock and throw them underneath it. So what happens is it's going to get rid of the bugs, which is why the armadillos are there. And then once the food source is gone, then the armadillos will leave, and then you pull the stuff out because the smell was coming up through the deck. We didn't want that. But it did run the armadillos off. Because we didn't want to hurt the armadillos. I like armadillos. But them being, I knew being in the yard, eventually they were going to start digging stuff up. Because that's what they did. And so, yes, ma'am.
I have a bunch of, I don't know, it gets fairly tall and it's kind of silvery up under my pecan tree. I mean, it just came up. And I don't know exactly what it is. It's kind of got a velvety.
Yeah.
You know.
Could be Dusty Miller has kind of a velvety leaf to it. Lamb's ear has a very soft, fuzzy leaf to it. Artemisia is another one that has it. You might take a picture of it and see if you can find it online. And, like I said, there's a couple of plant apps out there that you can take a picture and it'll tell you what they think it is. And sometimes it'll at least get you in the right track. You know, it'll say something, you can look it up somewhere else and decide whether, yeah, that's what it was. Any other questions? Okay, looks like she's coming with some more. Door.